Hello, David McMillan here. And today we have part 5 of the long-form interviews with Shaun Attwood, recorded quite some time ago now, but still fresh as a daisy, which was not quite what I was that morning down at Spiral Studios when we were recording. It's quite a good episode, and where it takes up is after the escape from Thailand. I suppose normally when you think of escaping from prison, what's to follow? Hiding out in the woods or flying to some South American beauty spot and living wonderfully off the illegal proceeds of the crime that got you there in the first place? But it wasn't exactly like that. I'd called in quite a few favors to get over the wall in Bangkok, and I had to really build up some money as soon as I could. There was no great pressure on that, but I'd found myself in Singapore, then had to disappear within a week from there, and then on into Pakistan, Baluchistan, and further. So in part 5, that's where we go. From the rooftop of, a small hotel in Singapore, a swimming pool there. I had the greatest swim I ever had in my life from that swimming pool after escaping, and I needed it too. But within a week, I was in a desolate location, looking at the documents I had and wondering about the documents I'd need, and where to go and how to do it. Let's jump into it, shall we?
Part 5, here we are, David McMillan.
Hello.
Got a loyal following now, you guys out there, been loving his videos. One of the most common questions I'm getting on YouTube is, when is David coming back on? Every day, when is David coming back on? When is David coming back on?
Well, I still have a pulse, Shaun, so as long as I've got that. But I should let everybody know that I'm not really up to par this morning. Too much 9-to-5 work. It's... I got that message when I was 18. You think I would have realized that it doesn't suit me. But nonetheless, we'll stagger through the various places we've got to go today.
How's the job going?
Nightmarish, but the CCTV is kind of interesting. I've got I had a job last week where a Colombian family, really.
Cartel.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I must have found the only Colombians in London that don't have connections.
So they say.
So they
all say.
They seem to own some properties. But they're worried about 80-year-old dad being abused by a carer. So I had to put 19 cameras in this place. It's too many. Nobody watches all of that.
The carer would have disappeared in the old days, but now cameras, that's the soft approach.
I suppose so. I think, I don't know, he's got a little touch of Alzheimer's, and so I had to build them in so that he couldn't play with them or detect where they were. Where would you disguise a camera?
Well, reading books about the DEA and the CIA, the methods that they have used, light bulbs, air conditioning vents.
Very much so. The standard ones are clocks. Pictures on the wall.
Pictures. Dorian Gray.
Smoke alarms, that's used a fair bit. I kind of like two-way mirrors myself.
Oh, CIA was heavily into that with the LSD experiments in San Francisco, I think it was.
But I suppose it's a comfort. You think around the world how many images are out there that nobody ever watches. Of course, AI, artificial intelligence, will soon enough make all that very easy to follow what people are doing. It'll make mistakes. Some innocent people will sadly suffer. But in the general good, you have to lose a few innocent people.
Well, Sheriff Joe Arpaio had got in trouble because he had cameras in his jail and perverts were looking at the women going on the toilet in the jail.
That's a kind of Japanesey thing, isn't it?
Yes,
the Japanese are very big upskirters. And I think there's a bar in Tokyo where it's got a glass tabletop and the girls run around underneath it. and the guys drink sake and go stupid. But I can't see really the point in all of that.
You were never an upskirter, David.
No, not really. Not really. But speaking of AI, I was very impressed with David Icke, isn't it?
David Icke, been the biggest thing on the channel in recent months. Yeah.
Yes.
Shout out to David, thank you.
Yes. And I suppose I should throw in my 2 cents about all of that. Though I love a conspiracy, I started out, even at 14, fully wound into it. They say there's either a personal God or a God for everybody. In the same way, conspiracies are a personal conspiracy against you, we're watching, or one behind big events. And, if there's a big event, something has to be behind it, like the Kennedy assassination. Seems very unlikely. But do you really think anything stays a secret for too long?
Well, I was just researching about the death of Kiki Camarena, who was the DEA agent that was featured in the latest season of Narcos Mexico.
Ah, yeah, the name rings a bell.
Yeah, and there were a few state police present at the kidnapping and torture who went into witness protection in America.
It was a grisly death too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, really grisly.
And
grisly.
The US was very determined to get somebody for
the
that.
DEA was.
Yeah, right.
But these state police who were present at the kidnapping and the murder, they went into witness protection under the DEA in America.
Yeah.
They told the DEA, everybody who was in that house, the cabinet secretary, the war secretary for Mexico, the CIA representative that was linked to Bush and all this stuff. And when the head of the DEA, who was assigned to investigate the death, filed all that in his reports, the response that came back was, stick to your work.
All right. Leave it alone.
Your work is the death of Kiki Camarera, not an investigation of a sister agency. There's a national security interest. Don't ever file any of this in these reports again, because they could come out in the court system. Put everything in secret, internal DEA memos that will never be revealed. So,
because of course in the US, because of the court system, things come out that way.
Yeah.
Have you noticed interesting thing in the UK? Very rarely do live telephone intercepts recordings are used in UK trials. They might use a bug planted in a car. The old Hatton Garden codgers got recorded in a car. I mean, how silly was that? You'd think they were old enough to know not to. A couple of people I know, they won't talk anywhere. And one, an Irish guy who always talks with his hand over his mouth. He's worried about lip readers. But anyway, so I was very tuned into to look for conspiracies early on. I read John Fowles' The Magus. It's a fictional book. And in that, the lead character gets manipulated completely in this entire, the latter part of his life, by events that are staged for him. And that was very well done. But on the comic side of it, in a way, have you read any of the Illuminatus trilogy? What's his name? Oh yes, Anton Wilson. He wrote them. They're terrific. I mean, it's ludicrous. There are 7 John Dillingers. Apparently that it was septuplets or something, and they grew up. The lead character in it is a guy called Hagbard Celine, who has a submarine smuggling A-class narcotics around the world. The Masons come into it. The Mormons come into it. There's even another group that comes from 1930s Harlem. The series is great. It goes back to the 70s. But for those who are sort of leaning towards conspiracies, are kind of light touch approach of these novels is a good place to start, so you can separate the likelihood from the unlikelihood. Now, a lot of things that happened in my life, I could reasonably assume that I was either very unlucky or there was something more to it. There's something more to it with the obvious thing. I annoyed authorities. I did that long stretch in Australia. I had business in Thailand. That got tangled up in the death of a DEA agent's wife. That's no way to make friends, but nothing to do with me. So when I would always be very alert to finding patterns and links between things, I met sometimes people just by chance 2 or 3 times over a period of 20 or 30 years. There was a US congressman that I kept meeting in transit lounges, and we'd chat, and he kind of spoke to me as though he knew me, referring to things on our side, the Western world, and spoke about the Mujahideen, which were one of the many Afghani groups that were funded by the CIA. But because he kept reoccurring, I started to think, is there something more going on? But that's just straight paranoia. Where it was of some interest is by observing very carefully. I think I mentioned before, when I was trying to leave a city once, and another little operation down in Green Park, I spent a whole morning with 5 people checking out almost everybody there, doing traces on number plates, finding out what somebody was doing. And people do strange things. One guy we followed was going into tall buildings, going to different floors, and doing nothing, retracing his steps. He was a fantasizer. He was imagining some old retired guy, some empire that he never had, people on trains being peculiar. But if you do observe things carefully, I can tell, some things do come to mind. And for those who like a bit of a mystery, I think we can share one that... Now, where do you think, when the crap hits the fan, that all the politicians in Westminster will run and hide?
Where will they go if, there's a nuclear war? Is that what you're saying?
Nuclear war, massive terrorist attack.
The conspiracy theory on the internet is that they have these underground bunkers in New Zealand.
Well, they don't. That would take some time to get to, involve a bit of air travel, unless they had a kayak. And...
So if it's immediate, I have a friend actually, and she did used to work for a company that did build underground bunkers in London, and they cost 50 million upwards for these bunkers.
Wow.
Yeah, so I imagine that would be one option.
Well, for those interested, they can see the one in London or see where it comes out and goes in. Folks, go to Westminster Tube Station. It's a new build, relatively, and a big renovation's been done. And if you take the escalators up, you'll realize that you're going quite deep, but you've passed through a floor that doesn't seem to exist. Now, it's got a lot of metal paneling everywhere. And you go up onto a kind of a landing, and there's some more stairs. But if you keep to the stairways, in the middle, you'll see a range of panels that have no reason to be there. And I'll give a signed copy to anybody who can identify where that entrance and exit is.
Put your answer in the comments section below this video, please, if you'd like a signed copy. Would that be a signed copy of Escape or Destiny?
Destiny at the moment. I think... but I should say, too, by the time people see this one, the audio versions of both of those books should be available.
Fantastic. And links to all of David's books on all of his socials and YouTube channel are in the description box below this video.
Yes. So clear observation is the best way of finding out what's really going on. But of course, we're in a big transition phase, aren't we? what was that? Cambridge Analytica, wasn't it? That got in trouble for using information from Facebook.
Just watched a documentary on them at the weekend on Netflix about the Great Hacking or something.
Oh, the Great Hack, yes.
The Great Hack. Yeah. So if you downloaded the app on Facebook, they not only got all of your personal data, but they got all the personal data from all of your friends on Facebook as well.
That's a nice little click, isn't it?
Isn't that a good trick?
Well, so many apps you download and you see this long list of things they seem to want. Access to your camera, your photos, your files. And you think, oh, to hell with it. Why not? Nobody can be bothered customizing that little bit or going into it. And they make it difficult. But I think more intrusive, yet less obvious is to come. You think of what you can find out about a person from the way they click through things, their hand gestures, the way they type, their finger movements. You could break down their psychology to such an extent that you could determine what their likely decision is when faced with a series of images or events.
From body language?
Yes, entirely like that. There was a famous test where cameras were set up in it was a kind of networking meeting. A lot of people were invited and they had name tags. Now, without taking the sound into account or any words the people spoke, they were able to predict which people would be the leaders within that group, which people would make contact and which people would stay together afterwards. And that prediction was done entirely by their movements. And I suppose that's because the part of our brains that does the talking is kind of like the bullshit department, really. Whereas we don't disguise our movement so much, except in a kind of limited way. So when all of that kind of tactile and haptic data is brought in, there'll be no secrets.
It's like how the gang members size people up when they're walking into the prison. The guy with a spring in his step, chest out, chin up, he's probably one of us. The guy shuffling, looking down, got something to hide, maybe a chomo, maybe a snitch, maybe we can exploit this guy somehow.
True, and then you've got the next layer of distinguishing the pretenders.
The pretenders.
And the ones with false bravado.
Yes.
Because, of course, they always say, don't they, beware of the quiet man, while others are talking, he's listening. When others are acting, he's preparing, and he'll strike when you don't know.
Well, I once got moved over to max security from medium after a year of being in medium.
Why? What did you do?
My prosecutor doubled my bail to 1.5 million. So when your bail goes over $1 million, you move to max. So I was doing the prison walk, walking in there up to this table of murderers, all the slang, all the prison slang, and they're just looking at me. They let me just stand on the end of the table, and they're deciding whether they're going to accept me or they're going to brutalize me. So I'm quite nervous, but I'm putting on this prison bravado like you described. Really? Yeah. Go back to my cell. The head of the gang, Bullet, who was a murderer, walks into my cell with all of his legal paperwork, gives it to me and says, I want you to read this for me.
Oh, that's right. I read that in
your
book.
So they'd seen right through my act.
Yeah.
I was a resource to them. I'm an educated person.
Exactly.
That's how good they are at reading body language.
I suppose they have so much practice that it becomes kind of a second nature. And also, yourself, that somebody who has even the skills to put together an internal prison application for something, or can read their way through court papers.
Yeah.
Or even for that matter, write the guy some kind of bogus love letter to his girlfriend. Many ways of being helpful there. Also, if you come from somewhere else, that's always a plus, because they will feel, have contacts in a whole new area that might be good stuff.
It's baffling for them as well, because they don't know how to pigeonhole you.
Yeah. I think, too, you can protect yourself by giving the impression that your security is done by some kind of foreign devils that they don't understand. Whereas a London villain will size up another London villain and think, yes, I can get on top of that one. If they're people that barely speak any English, and when they're carrying out a contract, they arrive with a Polaroid and just keep killing everybody who looks, well, close enough, a good match. The unknown is very fearful too.
Yes.
So, where were we last I was here?
We finished 4 episodes with you. I think all your episodes now combined clips must be approaching 1 million views. We escaped from death row in Thailand.
Yes.
You've gone to the country of... What was the country you went to?
I went to Singapore first, yes.
And you are establishing in Singapore some of your old resources to make a move from Singapore to your next destination.
Well, that's right, because the passport that I had to get out of Thailand was a stolen one, and it could be worked out what that name was by simply going through the passenger lists of that day, matching them against reported missing or lost passports, and then watching for the pattern there. And they'd get a few others who were doing their own kind of dodginess with on phony passports that day, but they could kind of work it out. So I really only had about a week, and I found a kind of crumpled travel agent, and where they used to write handwritten tickets, jumbled up the name a bit, and whereas today they have to be very exact. If there's a mismatch on your travel documents at all, they won't let you on. But back then they were, even though this ticket was written in a middle name. So I flew where nobody could touch me, I felt. And that was back into Pakistan. Now, I was no stranger to that place entirely. I'd been there back in the late 70s. And I was in my 20s doing some hash business there. And it was very different back then. It was run by General Zia al-Haq, who was obviously a military man and firm, a dictator, surely. And the whole town was quiet. Arriving in Karachi, I think there were 2 halfway okay hotels. The Intercontinental was one. It was very hard to get anything to eat. But I wasn't staying in Karachi. I was going to Baluchistan. Now, Karachi is part of Sindh province, and they have their own independence movement. And Baluchistan, which is over towards Iran, again, they have their own language, and they have an independence movement. And my friend there was Mir, which means Lord, Nur Jahan Magsi of the Magsi clan. And I'd met him, I suppose, back in 1979, at a checkpoint where we all ended up wanting to decide what to do about it. And so I learned a lot from this guy. He handled them well. He had some military people that were kind of on his little team. And he was, as you expect, being a lord, he didn't have huge holdings. Quite modest in a way, his little castle along the coast. But I was there more or less on a bit of smuggling, a bit of feeling my way. I managed to offend a few villagers along the way.
So you arrive at a checkpoint and you said he handled them well. What do you mean by that?
Well,
and how did you get to this checkpoint in the first place? What were you doing?
I was driving with my guide, who was Lee, my old Thailand contact, who had some, on part of his family, had some Pakistani origins. So we were headed off to a village where he had friends. We stopped at a few little ones. Bear in mind, this is 70s, so anything kind of goes. The women are running around with burqas and the grills over their face, the village headman understood a bit of English, and I thought I'd say something clever and said, well, doesn't look good, but at least you can marry off the ugly ones, huh?
Oh,
and
dear.
everything visibly tightened. My guides sort of clenched weapons under their shirts, and Lee said, David, we've got to get out of here now. So we did, and apparently they smashed the cup that I drank out of, burnt the chair that I sat in, and the women were seen sweeping away with bunches of sticks my foot impressions in the dust.
You never existed.
That's a negative, isn't it? So I didn't win that village over, but we found one in the end. But at the crossing, these crossings are, they're on the so-called main road, but it's still a dirt track. And you either pay a little bit of something and they annoy you, the checkpoint guards there. But there was 5 of us there, and I was getting ready to pay something, but I could see that there were too many for the right day. Something else was going on. There was a senior officer there and 2 half-wits with very aging, rusty guns. But they were just seeing through a bit of smuggling that goes through in Baluchistan. And so I think they had that look like they wanted to play with me a bit and see what could be rinsed out. And my guides were pretty nervous. But
how did you get guides?
Lee, my Thai contact from there, he had family members who were living in that part, so they knew their way around. But they were not Baluchis. And luckily, at about the time it wasn't working out well, a white Mercedes drew up, and in a cloud of billowing silk cloth, Nurjan emerged, and with his gold watches and chains, and started talking to 4 different people in different languages all at once, and kind of looked at me, and it must have taken a shine to me. He sort of just took me with him, and the spooky kind of army people all kind of suddenly relaxed. He had his own bit of business there, which was he had a couple of distilleries going. But though we left a few bottles, we didn't stay around to have any drinks. But we stayed with him for a while, and I was going into Afghanistan at the time, where the village I wanted was. Made some arrangement for about 800 or 900 kilos of hash, and then went on looking at what I thought were old Persian forts. But Nurjan knew that they were not that. We'd actually come across one of Alexander the Great's ruined cities there, not far from Kandahar.
Wow.
So we stayed friends, of course. Now, the advantage of going to stay with him was that anybody asking about me would become part of the desert soil. And it's very unlikely anybody would. And if there was any background to it, I'd come to know about it. I was invited into the family house. They brought me little trays of breakfast in the morning. I fixed up their satellite dishes for them, which they tuned into a real mixture of crap that comes over the airwaves. But we began friends there and stayed friends for many, many years. During my 10-year break from there, when I had the trouble in Australia, Nurjan had his own trouble, and he was arrested in the Great September 30 massacre.
What was that?
His group went up against some of the one of the Karachi, we'll call them political groups. They have political aspirations, but really they're just crooks, just a gang of villains. And over 80 people were killed that day. Of course, somebody had to be, it's a bit like rounding up the usual suspects in Casablanca, and people get arrested. And he was ultimately bailed on that, unbelievably. But that's something to remember if people, if you find yourself stuck in Pakistan, and India for that matter, it applies. The Supreme Court there has ruled that if a case is not completed in 2 years, bail must be given. So that's what you see people doing, just waiting out their 2 years. They get bail and then delay the case forever. So he got out. But I then had to really think, where was I? How much damage had been done, and where to next? After all, I'm 42 by this stage. I've had all the trouble in Australia. My wife was killed in the prison fire. I'd been released from that to be pursued again. Ended up in Thailand. Things weren't going well there. Managed to escape from it. But and of course, in the beginning, there was a lot of goodwill. People, were quite happy that I'd escaped from there and were sending money. But I knew that wouldn't last forever. And it had kind of worn me out, really. It somehow seemed much more relaxing to be in the middle of nowhere at that time. But I couldn't stay there forever, and thought, I best go back to Europe to see what's left of little things I'd stashed around, some accounts, a couple of bank deposit boxes, and prepared for that journey. Of course, the quality of the passports you can get in that part of the world is varied and mixed. Everything from those old, remember the old British passport with the black cover?
Yes.
It was like a taller little booklet than most, and handwritten on the inside. The Foreign Office used to call it the Foreigner Frightener, because it had those words inside saying, Her Britannic Majesty commands that all those who have dealings with this person, let that person travel without let or hindrance, whatever let is. There was some of those available, but they were useless. I had one that was okay, and I had a London contact trying to get another. But I knew things all connected with my own name would have been burnt. And there wasn't much left of the old riches that I could get my hands on. Thailand had drained me a lot of that. And all the scammers, of course, had jumped in. Oh, we're getting David out. We've got a plan. The ones for the bail applications, the ones to manipulate the court. And unless you're the one doing the manipulating, it's hard to see that money reach the right place.
Those scammers, then, they just assumed, okay, we'll scam his money. He's probably going to get the death penalty anyway. He's finished. When you got out, did any of those scammers have second thoughts about what they'd done?
Well, one that disappeared with, it was at least $50,000. And he'd been in touch with Lee, my old contact there, and milked him for a fair bit. He was philosophical about it, but I did catch up with him. He was a Bostonian. And, of course, I was annoyed, but I didn't do anything about it, and for this reason. I was so depressed and suicidal at the time I was in the prison there in Bangkok. Even though I did suspect that he was a bit of a scammer, when I met him in there, he was only doing some short sentence for a bit of dope or something. He was out within a year. It sort of gave me hope, Shaun, that there was some possibility of survival. So I owed him a little, even in his, creepy, false way. I think he might have even had some intention of doing something right at some stage. But anyway, there was not much left. So I have to return to Europe. And I was getting a bit of a tan there, and I'd grown a moustache. I was looking a bit like a local, often dressed in the shalwar kameez, the flowing robes, to blend in. And I started to realize that my passports looked like a Pakistani guy with a fake British passport trying to get through the airport. I thought, I need to clean that up. So I didn't even really have any proper clothes. And have you noticed something about, my friends took me to tailors in Quetta and elsewhere, but the suits always came back ill-fitting. Have you ever noticed the way they can't do a collar properly in the small places there? So I went to a place where it was like Ali Baba's cave. It was a huge warehouse, packed to the ceiling with bales and bales of clothes. What these clothes were donations that well-intentioned folk from the US or Europe, England, had donated, and they got sent over there. Now, I don't know what people imagine happens to them there. Do they picture somebody kind of young and well-meaning is standing on a street corner handing out, try this jacket. Trousers fit, we can take them up. Of course, none of that's happening. They get immediately taken in by the businessmen there and recycled, and unfortunately too, as it's done in Africa, ruins the indigenous industry. They can't compete with all this free clothing. So a lot of the factories that are producing cheap T-shirts for export, they do all right, but the local industries were just about destroyed.
Seems every good cause gets co-opted these days.
Yes, and half the time when we think we're doing something good and noble, all we're doing is making things worse. So I bought myself some winter clothing and a Macintosh from Alibaba, and had a little look around, and he'd had some things that passing travelers must have got, including it was 3 gold CDs as an award for something called Atherton Studios for, I forget what, 100,000 copies of the 3 tenors. And it was they were mounted on a plaque. And there was just something kind of interesting about it. And he said to me, it's not real gold, He'd never forgiven himself for buying this or stealing it, and it wasn't real gold. I did explain that gold CDs can't be real gold. But I took that with me. And then on 2 kind of iffy passports, where did I go? I flew, the Schengen agreement within Europe had just started. That means no borders within the European Union, though the UK still had an immigration check. And I figured, what's the laziest airport that I'm likely to have? And I picked Athens because there was a PIA, Pakistan International Airlines flight that went in a strange way all the way up to Oslo and then backtracked to Greece. So that allowed me to get into Oslo, buy a ticket in the transit lounge, and then go into the Schengen area in Greece, arriving that way. Of course, my passport still told a slightly different story. A lot of my friends back then, they used their ID cards from France or Germany and switched to those when they arrived in some other, come off the long haul from Thailand, pocket that passport and then switch to the other one. Especially going through Zurich or Geneva was very good for that sort of thing. They had a nice little post office. You could actually post that passport away from your pockets and then stay on the ID card. But I was a little bit nervous. I thought, well, I didn't know how any of these things would hold up. And then I took trains across Europe through Italy. I took a kind of rattling overnight sleeper from Italy to Paris. And the guard on board takes everybody's passport and then gives it back later. And I, for my reasons, didn't like it, but my bunkmates in this carriage didn't like it either. And talking to them, I could see they were all on phony documents. One said he was Iranian, another said he was Iraqi. I don't know what passports they were showing, but I don't think they could even read their own passports. So when the guard came back with all these passports, there was much relief in that carriage, I can tell you.
If you have escaped from death row in Thailand, and the Thai authorities are well aware of this now, does that therefore mean if you get caught in any of these countries now, if they've got an extradition treaty with Thailand, which most of them probably did, you're going right back to death row in Thailand?
Not as it was, because Thailand hadn't figured out a way around explaining away the death penalty aspect of it. So I knew I was okay like that. But I just didn't even want anything. I'd had a few months recuperation in Baluchistan, and really landing in Europe was the completion of the trip that I'd started when I disappeared under the radar in Australia, stopped in Thailand supposedly in Bangkok for 2 days, and then was going on to Europe. So this was the same journey, just interrupted by 2.5 years and having to escape from the place. So, as you go on, Shaun, the tolerance for disasters gets worn away. You just don't have it so much. And of course it didn't, I finally got into smoggy London and smelt that smell. Have you noticed when you get to Heathrow, there's a particular smell to it? And you remember that smell of London as a city.
The whole country smells different when I got back from Arizona. Because when you get to Arizona, it's just like an oven as soon as you open the door of the plane.
It really is that hot.
Yeah, it's like an oven that just hits you. So you get back to England and there's the moisture and the cold and all the different smells.
Mm. And of course, I went to things that were hidden. One turned out to be a car park. It was a house when I hid something in there. It was a car park, so that was out.
Was that money you'd hidden there?
Yeah. There was another I had some accounts that had been grabbed under that 7-year rule inactivity. Because really we're going back to when everything was kind of all right in Australia, then the big arrest, the trial, the 10 years in there, then to Thailand. So I'm going back, in some cases, 15 years. And I found when the font of congratulatory money started to dry up, that I was in a cheap hotel in Paddington with one of those towels, and it's like some scratchy kind of scouring pad, and those microscopic soaps that you could lose somewhere in the back of your ear.
Prison soaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I think communal showers, I think it might have even had, or something worse than that. And I sort of had to kind of laugh to myself, well, it had come to that. But all was not lost, Shaun. Oh, no. Oh, no. The 3 tenors. The thickness of the plaque that held the 3 tenors was about 1/2 inch when I got it from Ali Baba's cave. When I began traveling, it was 1.5 inches. As I'd left Lahore, when it went through security, they thought it was a CD player. So I thought, he said, where do you plug it in? Yeah, okay. But the good thing, in Europe, it was self-explanatory. It was in a nice presentation box. It had tissue paper. There was a little note in there, one sound engineer to another, we did it, mate, that kind of thing. It had I had lots of time to make it look authentic. So I had a bit of cargo there. And this was some pretty good heroin made locally out in just on the Afghani border. But everybody I knew was gone. I just had one telephone number of a guy in Sweden I'd never met, and the name. Okay. And by the way, that had come to me through a prison link, somebody I'd met. I can imagine how that's going to be quality stuff, isn't it? Lucky the country existed, let alone the contact. So with my last shekels, I trained my way through Germany and up, crossing over from Kiel, always overland, which is quite expensive doing that by train. It's a lot easier. But, and went off to meet Thomas. And I didn't like using the phone, but there was no avoiding it in the beginning. Thomas. Yes. You can rely on a Swede to speak perfect English. My name's Mike, or whatever I said. We have a mutual friend. He said I should get in touch. And Thomas said, pause, come round. It was a Sunday night. So I found his warm little apartment 2 floors up. He had opened the door. There's a cat. Went into the living room. I liked it. It was somebody who took care with his life in some area. There were lots of books there. The furnishings were soft. Clearly a bachelor, a bit of a lost soul. And we chatted about our mutual friend, the one who gave me the number, very briefly. And he knew I had something. He knew I wouldn't have been there without something. And I said, I have cargo. And extraordinarily enough, when you've had a lot of bad luck, I had some good luck. He made one phone call, and then a kind of half an hour later, a shaggy, long-haired guy called Wolf turned up. It was wanted at the time in Sweden. And all was well. This Thomas was a junkie, but held down a day job as a photo editor of some magazine. And as we were waiting for old Wolf, we got newspapers out and cracked open the 3 tenners. And I said to Thomas, be my guest. I will, he said. And it was good. So, and of course, the price there at the time was about 3 times what it would have been anywhere else. And it was one of the few places left in Europe that, with those who liked that, liked white heroin. So it was the right place at the right time. Wolf came around. We talked about living in the countryside, how he developed a distaste for salmon, eating so much of it. Then he feasted his eyes on my produce, and I told him entertaining stories about where it's been and where it came from. And as always, the stuff looked up at me, glinting there on the newspaper, saying, "You're not sending me anywhere bad, are you? Don't worry, stuff. You'll find a home. Lots of happy people here." And a very honest businessman, even in that trade. Wolf said he'd be back the next day. And Thomas said, "Mi casa, su casa." And I started to make myself at home there to sleep on the sofa. But Wolf came back earlier than I thought. And I had the equivalent of $200,000 by midnight on a Sunday, having landed with barely enough money for a cup of coffee and a taxi to Thomas's place, on a contact given in a prison for a guy I didn't know. So I had a blissful sleep that night. sleeping the kind of sleep that children have, or only the truly guilty. And then, strange thing, always that little flatness of, all right, I can eat, I can house myself, I can go on. Where to next? Well, I had to stay there a few days to change all that Swedish krona into UK pounds. English travellers and tourists are always carelessly leaving their pounds in foreign hands. So it was my duty to get that back and bring it back to England. I said that to a judge once in my mitigation. It's a hint that, well, at least I go and get back the money we leave with foreigners. I wasn't impressed. Anyway, so I got back to London and then started contacting people of kind of the survival network from Colombia and Cali, and seeing who was who. It went very well for the next 12 months. I got myself a Mews house, Bedford Mews it was, down in Chelsea. Just a one bedroom, but on 3 floors. When I said to the landlord that I was going to redecorate and put in electric curtains on the skylights, he didn't fuss too much about my dubious references. The thing that, of course, you can do if the references that you give when you say, I've lived in Australia or the United States, I've been working, they can never really check them out. And anyway, faxes were still in use then. So the references went out. Michael back in Australia collected them from the print shop and then sent back other documents. So that was enough for them and the money. Opened up an account at the Banco Bilbao Vizcaya down in Knightsbridge, one I'd had my eye on for a while. It looked like the kind of bank that, I was just in there once buying some foreign currency, and they had one of those money counting machines behind the counter. And the customer before me, she was some rich Knightsbridge X-ray, with those women that are all bones and jewellery.
X-ray? Oh my goodness.
Place was full of X-rays, and she wanted like £5,000 or something to squander on any young man that would put up with her company for a few minutes. So nonchalantly, the cashier there, he just flipped it through. I said, what do I need to open an account here? Not much was the answer. And we're not going to read it too closely either. So I had one of those and began having something of a life again. Now, what was that life? Yeah. Smuggling, of course. And I went back to Colombia. And I wasn't... I kept out of the heroin business, not on any principle, of course, but simply because it meant going back into Pakistan, and I wasn't in a hurry.
So what are you smuggling at this point, and how are you coordinating it?
Right. Through the Scandinavian links, I met a few other people. A couple of the couriers who'd worked for the Danish guys had been arrested in different cities around the world, and some in Bangkok, and I got to know them, so that gave me a link to there. Within Scandinavia, the coke prices were always quite a lot higher than the UK, and I don't know, I thought it made sense not to do any business here, but to keep everything to Northern Europe, where it was kind of calm and civilized and relaxed.
What year is this then now?
This is going to, we're in 1996, 97, 98.
So Escobar's dead and the Cali cartel are dominating the cocaine trade. Is that who you're getting your cocaine through?
No, I don't know whether I've mentioned this before, but I found if I met some quite big people in Colombia. You know, David, whatever you want, you can have it. It'll be delivered. Pick it up in Spain. Malaga particularly was popular. They had a kind of local branch office there. You know? But here's the problem. You can imagine, Shaun, you're starting to ask yourself, what is it I do here? In the end, all you're doing is selling their stuff for them in Europe. The things that arrive, even if you start out buying your own and adding it to a shipment, what does that mean? One of yours got through, but 9 of ours did. So you owe us £31,562.50 on each of those. And I do what you want with the others. So you realize quite quickly you're just going to be a small cog in their big machine.
You're a salesman, not a kingpin anymore.
Yes, yeah. And not only that, exposed to their failings. So many times I had to skirt around. There was, I'll call him Pablo, though I've never actually written about him, even though he's gone with the wind. I suppose it can be written about now, but he was always trying new schemes. He had people and suitcases going. He had it used that process where you take the cocaine and dissolve it in alcohol, mix in some kind of plastic nitrate fibers, very tiny ones, microscopic almost. Let it evaporate down. It makes a grey paste. That grey paste can be shaped into a kind of plastic. And when it dries, it's flexible, almost rubbery. Quite the worst part about bringing it back is having to chop all that up. You go through a few coffee grinders doing it. They'll burn out. But it all does come back once it's dissolved back. But you need some. I needed a place to do it, and 3 microwave ovens, just little 10-second bursts. A couple of people have blown up their own flats by getting a little bit impatient. But it's a kind of golden moment, if I should shamefully call it that, when this paste crystallizes back around the rim of the bowl that's in the microwave and kind of fluffs up and glints at you with that opalescent sheen. And because it's your duty, you have a line. You can't be passing on something that might not be quite up to par. And was I sure that was actually what I thought it was? I best have another.
Your reputation's on the line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I tell you what, I haven't got the... I've just kind of lost interest in so many intoxicants now. If I see
probably
some...
a good thing.
Yeah, but I feel a bit... weeks ago, I saw somebody I hadn't seen for a long time. And you know how the guys... chop up a bit, and somebody else will say, don't mind if I do, it'd be rude not to. I kind of feel like the kid whose mother's trying to get him to eat broccoli. Mummy, I don't want to eat my cocaine. It's just, it won't be very good. It won't be like it's from over there, and it'd be full of those nervy adulterants of the ephedrine and whatnot.
So pure, isn't it?
That crap the Albanians had delivered to your door 24/7. I still get a lot of WhatsApp messages from people like Joe and Tony, whoever the hell they are. I don't know how they got my number. 24. Their little logo. People put a picture in of their face or something. You know, it's just a kind of 24/7 sign on there. So, you know, great shine, you know, banging it is. Yeah, I think, you know, bang it yourself. I don't know. Yeah, it's just too tiring to wake up with a hangover and have to listen to a whole lot of crap spoken by half-wits. I don't have to go far to get that. So, you know.
I never really got into coke. I always went into meth instead of coke because it lasted longer.
So, still with us? What comes up next is probably some detail that quite a few are really interested in. Just, you'd think routine stuff, but how to deal with the documents on your person when you're travelling internationally. Do you want to be found with 2 passports? I don't think so. Where can you hide them? How can you move them from within transit lounges? And that's one of the things that comes up. Also, we then go on to further troubles. Not in huge detail, but enough. Let's move on. Well, you know, the thing is too, I knew a stockbroker who was turned into a swindler, and he, I forget all the names, but it was some kind of speedy meth, apparently one that's a bit different or better, and days would pass.
Glass or ice?
It could have been, but what's mephedrone something? I forget which. But anyway, it kind of more or less gave him something to do all the time. But he'd end up getting careless. He used to go into upmarket gymnasiums and saunas and get into the locker room and lift all the Amex cards out of the lockers. And before they had toweled themselves off from the pool, he would have run around town and caused havoc with them. And that'd all, get wasted or well used, depending on your point of view on his habits. Because Pablo could make it into anything, yet here again, this was the same problem. I mean, I'd have to be quite strict about it. I'd say, look, I'm paying you this 5,000, which is 3 times the price, to have it made into whatever it might be. I mean, once used dinnerware, plates and things like that. And I didn't want to have all his disastrous crap. He was always wanting couriers, and then he'd take them over to Lima because Bogota was hopeless to get out of. It was just too much heat. And one of them got into trouble because I'd sent him somebody who was keen to go, and I gave him lots of warnings. I said, look, do follow these rules. Don't take his SIM card. Don't ever take it. They're cheapskates. They'll give you the same SIM card that 3 people have been arrested with before.
It's like not throwing away the murder weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this poor young guy took the SIM card, and made the call to family. And the SIM card, the DEA had all of Pablo's cards and connections. And they didn't arrest everybody. You know how it is. Sometimes it's more interesting for them to let something go through. For years, they were letting entire Chicago networks operate without interference while they built up a massive picture of what they wanted. But I suppose times are changing for them too. The DA, I mean, they, with the legalization of weed, they've had to pretty much abandon all of that. I suppose within themselves they don't get funded. And they're not the big high-flying thing they used to be, really, are they?
Well, you've got some states have delegalized, decriminalized, legalized. Federal government still got it as a Schedule 1 substance.
What, weed?
Weed with more...
Oh, that's right. They can't bank, can they?
So that is the DEA. And if you look at the work of the DEA, Marijuana arrests are a massive amount of the work, and not dealers, users. Drug arrests in America in general, users are the majority of the arrests. That's how they stay in business.
Money, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So people say to me, Shaun, people aren't still getting arrested in America for weed, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes on the comments when I say things like this, there are people doing life sentences for weed possession in America right now under 3 strikes laws for weed possession.
Really?
If people don't believe that, just put in Google, life sentence, 3 strikes law, weed possession, and it will all come up. I was in the Cannabis Museum in Amsterdam, and it had all that on the walls and stuff about all these people doing these life sentences.
Wasn't there stories of some small towns years ago when the laws allowed them to confiscate people's property and keep it within the town? People were finding they got arrested on either trivial amounts or actually nothing, a setup, had all their property taken, which the sheriff's department was then able to use.
Civil asset forfeiture laws in America are basically just, it's like the mafia coming in and extorting you and liquidating you. So, for example, teenage kids are out in the parents' car, they're on down some country road smoking weed, police come along, they take the parents' car. There's situations where the police have kept the parents' car on the civil asset forfeiture laws. Yeah.
Well, it's a 100% taxation, I suppose. Isn't
Shake down.
I should mention that when I returned to Europe, I took a detour to Italy. Going back what would have been almost 15 years, as I was preparing to leave Australia for good, and of course take Clelia with me and move entirely, I'd rented a villa in Torino and paid for it in advance, and Clelia sent a suitcase of hers there. I don't know what really made me think that there'd be anything there, but I had time on my hands and drove out there and found that it was winter, so it wasn't being rented out. But the old caretaker there, he lived there with his wife. He was a gardener as well. When I more or less made myself understood, he just the number of years, and speaking of valise, he took me to a kind of shed, and there was a suitcase there from a little time capsule from 15 years beforehand, and I took it. And I thought, well, I don't know what to. Stopped on the roadside and had a look inside. There was a couple of Clelia's dresses in there and some of her other clothing. And as I picked it up and smelled it, I imagined there were traces of some perfume she might have. And she'd written me a note in there saying that she was sure that I would get to see this suitcase before her because, David, you always case the place before I arrive to make sure everything's all right.
How did you feel reading that and smelling all those smells? I mean, were your eyes
really,
misting over?
a bit breathless and lost. Of course, all the guilt from back then, and because I'd blame myself for her death, of course, with good reason. She shouldn't have been in that jail. I shouldn't have let it come to that. And it just, as you dispose of lives, well, in mine, as I dispose of them, as I go on, they become a kind of series of pictures and almost as though they belong to somebody else. But this was suddenly made it all real. And I wasn't going to lug this thing around, so I I went to take one of my own shirts out of there and stuffed it back in. And I threw it in a river. The damn thing wouldn't sink. Just floated around. What do they say? Sorrow floats. So some of the old, most of it, I realized I'll just have to wipe everything from the past. So I was doing some business from Colombia. I was doing quite well with that. The Muse House in the garage there, I'd made a workshop so I could build little things that I wanted. I made an architect's drawing board because the thing about hiding stuff, people look at a statue and they think, oh, I'll hide it in the statue or some lumpy thing, or well, how much could I get in that microphone if I replaced it with a little crappy microphone and stuffed it in there. But they're thinking the wrong way. Something must instantaneously appear that it doesn't hold anything. You could, I would imagine, if you had the patience for it, you could get some, because everything's kind of been done. I bet you that there's barely anything that I've thought of that somebody hasn't actually tried. But you could get cotton buds, which have a little very thin plastic straw. If you set yourself up a machine to pack something in that, then it's not a hiding place because it's just boxes of these plastic straws. Of course, you'd need another machine to kind of quickly saturate it and bring something back. But people do some ridiculous things. Did you see that guy arrested in Spain a few weeks ago with the false toupee? Now, it looked like some ostrich had laid an egg on his head. And he must have been, never mind the stretch or whatever, jail or get out of it. It wasn't that much after all, less than a kilo. But he must have been embarrassed having his mugshots taken. And I don't know whether it looked any better, when he was stepping off the plane. But I'm guessing not. Because the way that they left the cocaine egg sitting up there and then put the silly toupee back on there. And which looked like chicken feathers or something sticking up into the air. And so everything would be tried, but I suppose I don't think that it really worked terribly well. You can't. Something about buff-headed, big-headed people that attract your eye anyway, I would think. No, Pablo used to use the jelly bellies with some success. This one was, the coke's underneath, a layer of sponge, and then a kind of a soft latexy gut. And he had this guy, he said to me, look, feel him, tap him down. And it did seem all right. It sprang back a bit. So at a pat-down search. But I did suggest to him that, look, why not give him, forget all the jacket, just because if they take his clothes off anyway, he's gone. They'll see the retaining straps. So to prevent it, just put him in a cheap Hawaiian holiday shirt of silk or something that's a size or two too small. So his fat gut's almost poking out of this thing. And they just think it's some, fat slob that, they wouldn't think anything of it. But I think, I think, of course, the authorities know that. That's why they try and, identify the people.
I did have a few people get through with ecstasy strapped around the midsection and then just close over it when we were testing our methods in the earlier years, yeah.
But this was where you knew they were going through electronic security, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that there was no chance of a pat down.
Well, if they'd looked out of place, they would have been come with us.
Pulled aside.
Well, they just brisked through, yeah.
I noticed on a lot of the banged up abroads they'd have and it seems accurate enough from this point of view, extremely nervous, novice courier. People generally are a bit nervous in an airport anyway, but some of these people, you can see how easily they would have been jumped on. Because the best of the couriers, of course, didn't allow any of that into their mind. They were the true fantasizers were already, in some daydreaming world of. A lot of them were. You won't be surprised to know, the ones who were gamblers were often attracted to that line of work. I got a false passport for one. I said, "Look, you can pick any name you like," and so he picked first name Roland. That was right. Second name, Win, Winn. And it took me a while to realize Roland Win. The roll the dice and you win.
I had one smuggler, and his method was whoever the authority figures that were at the airport, he'd go up to them and ask them a question. Like he wasn't scared of them at all.
It depends where you are. That's all right if you're the foreigner in a foreign land. You can do that, say, to an Englishman, to an American, or another European. But it's a very risky strategy to do that here. I've seen it happen at where was it, Gatwick, where somebody overdid that play. Went up and said to the customs officer who was just standing around doing nothing, am I allowed 2 or 3 bottles of what? Of alcohol? 2, a litre. What are you asking? And you could say he was thinking, what's this guy asking me a lame-ass question like that? And suddenly he got all curious about him. Why is he palling up to me? Years ago, they had porters. I don't even think they're around anymore, are they? And they used to work at Gatwick, and they all were a bit. If you picked an experienced one, one put my not terribly big 2 suitcases onto the trolley, and as we set off, he said, "Nothing to declare, is it?" So I followed his lead. He walked at a certain pace. When he walked past customs, he just kind of gave a colleague nod, like, leave me alone. And you know what? He was not surprised at all when I gave him a £50 tip. I guess him thinking, it's still not much, is it?
There you go, more invaluable lessons from David.
Not that you should do that, because it's... You don't want to be sitting around a prison cell telling the story, that's for sure. So, I kind of thought I might retire again. I had the Mews House in London, and really plenty of money, nothing much to do with that, and even started looking for sort of vaguely good causes to give it to. My friends were saying, "Oh, you're feeling guilty, David." But the good causes are not easy so much to give to, except for those supporting Shaun's channel. And that's a good cause if ever I heard one.
With all of the demonetizations, we do now have donation links, Patreon links, PayPal, Just Giving, all in the description box below this video. If you want to support production of the True Crime Podcast at its regular high standard, we're appreciating everything that's come in so far. Thank you.
You can wrap it in plastic and throw it over the bridge at London. We'll find it. Right. Yeah. Okay. Good causes. Well, I was protected in a way by that, not having anything terribly much I cared about, nothing to lose. But then I met Eloise. Yes. I try not to get tangled up in any relationships. I certainly didn't want anything ongoing or complicated. If I had a girl around to my little house, well, that was rare anyway. I kept another place in Earl's Court, a little flat. So that extra layer, I mean, I could sit in there and listen to music and felt pretty much untouchable. I just remembered, Shaun, there's £2,000 in that Muse house. You know, these PowerPoint things, you know, the phony ones that used to be a safe? It's probably still there. Not going to give the address.
In the old banknotes.
Yeah, you'd have to sell them as collector's items, wouldn't you?
You can't change them anymore then.
Well, I suppose that's what I'm thinking. You need to take them to a numismatist or those people who collect money, banknotes.
Is that why they do that then? So people who've laundered money or hidden money years later, if there's a new note, those people, that money's squashed.
Kind of. Some countries do it worse than others. India notoriously said that all the values over 5,000 rupees would have no value. There's a certain date, and people were, pulling it out from the mattresses and trying to do things with it. But it was a rush job. They only gave them about 3 weeks. It's a way of governments getting out of their debt, I suppose, isn't it? But so I didn't really want anybody in my life like this. But there was something kind of intriguing about this girl. I met her at some do-gooder outfit. It was a combination of economists and Greens who, you can imagine the trouble they caused. But I kind of got bored with it a bit. But as she came out of the office, she passed by, and we got talking, and we had lunch. And I realized that there's nothing much I could say about my past. I can talk about nonsense forever, as you know, but I'd sort of avoid anything that had a past. But she knew from my accent there was some Australian background. But I would annoy her because when I met her dad, I'd drop the Australian accent entirely. So she said, but no, he's not from here. But she was very skittish. Have you ever pursued some girl that is alluring, drawing you in, but runs away at a touch at the same time?
That then incentivizes you to try harder, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and you feel like you're being the mug because that's an old game, that one. But I don't know. There was something about her. She must have had a very high pheromone count or something like that. But I tried to, and she had a long list of phobias, Shaun. She hated umbrellas, would rather stand in the rain. She didn't like the dark spaces under bathtubs. I took her to the portrait gallery. She looked around it. All dead people, she said. Oh, God. At Blake's, in a nice hotel, shishi, upmarket restaurant there. Sat there worrying all night. This is too Byzantine or something like that. Expected Turks to run out with scimitars at any minute or something like that. Would ring me up in the middle of the night, and I'd go around there, but just away from the prize. So it became a bit of an obsession. And I suppose it gave me something to do. I couldn't flatter her with too expensive jewelry because she'd worry about that it was too high a value. And I pulled out all stops one day by bringing an old American girlfriend of mine from years ago, Sylvia Troy, who was very good looking. And I thought, well, this has got to work if you've got the competition there.
Love triangle.
I said, Sylvia, kind of hang off me a bit tonight. She's supposed to bring somebody, but she didn't. screwed the whole thing up. And it didn't work at all. All she was sort of broken-hearted. And I put her in a taxi, and she looked like I just told her I had to have her cat put down or something like that. But and I think she was a bit nuts too. Mother was in a nut house, and she used to see some kind of a psychologist or something like that, counselor, and had a bad experience with an older man years earlier when a psychiatrist put the hard word on her. So I thought this psychologist needed to be gotten rid of too. Well, I'll cut through the chase here. Finally got her in the end. And then she turned to me and said, well, you took your time. And what? But you know where things are going wrong here, Shaun? I've got something to lose. Something I like.
A weakness now.
Something I care about. Something that I'd want to protect. And it always seems to be a curse when you've got something. You know, the people who sail through life, through minefields and bullet storms, they're the same people that don't care. But the ones who've got something they want to protect, they're in real danger.
That's how they got Escobar in the end.
Wasn't it? It was through careless phone calls or something, wasn't it?
He was protecting his family. They killed a nanny, they killed the kid's teacher, and they made it clear that they were going to chop the kids up and send them to Pablo in a plastic bag. He could have been hiding out in the jungle.
When you say they, which
the death squad Los Pepes.
Oh, yeah.
Run by the Castaño brothers and Don Berna. They said they were going to chop his kids up and send them to him in a sack. So he stayed in town, Medellin. He was on the phone with them. That's how they got him. They knew if they just tightened that noose.
Didn't he have somebody who'd misled him into thinking that this, some kind of message service that he was using or phone system was immune from intercept?
Well, his brother had warned him that it was being intercepted.
Oh,
and because he stayed on the phone longer than the minutes that he felt were safe, his son believes he gave himself up on purpose to sacrifice himself for the family. Because in the end, it looks like the kill shot, there was a shootout with Los Pepes, but the kill shot went right through his head. And he said he was going to do that rather than get captured by the Castaño brothers.
Yeah, and that wouldn't have been pleasant.
They said they were going to chop his arms and legs off, have a doctor keep him alive, and throw the torso on the streets of Medellin. So that would guarantee their legend. All this in my new book about Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar's story, longest book ever written in the Western world. One of the parts one and two are out now on Amazon worldwide. Yeah, Pablo Escobar's story. It's going to be over 1,000 pages long. It's going to be 4 books.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you going to record the audio version?
No, I've learned that I am not. That is a skill set I do not possess.
Oh,
I learned the hard way.
It hasn't worked out so well.
I posted one book that I narrated and read the reviews.
Scathing. Well, perhaps you'd like me to read your books for you.
Well, let's get yours up. Let's see how your reviews pan out. But I think they're going to be very good because you're a natural.
Well, I think they'll be easier to read than I've got a slightly florid writing style. Then I think me saying it will make the points clearer because you can sort of pause to let the reader catch up. So, where am I here? I think, what do I need to do? I need to really settle the people I'm in business with. You can't really just walk away from something. Say, I'm fine, boys. Look, here's a couple of numbers. Kick on with it. You really have to kind of bring people together so that they feel way in the background. You're the honest broker in between everybody. Now that applies for all the businessmen, which was fine. The Cali people had a place to go. I had a connection with Bobby Jr. was the son of captain in one of the New York families that I'd met years ago. They took me on a little tour back in the 70s of how they ran their operation. They'd take over apartments and put a steel door there with a little trap door, and the customers would come up and buy dime bags, and the police are in on it and all of this.
This is the Italian mafia.
Yeah, but the son, Bobby Jr., always claimed he had nothing to do with anything. You know, he wasn't a bit like, what's that guy, Michael Francisi? You know, so, yeah, fully in it, but lots of denials. And I can't really give his real name at the moment. I'm just waiting for one person to drop dead so that nobody gets harmed. And
do you think Francis denies things to a certain point because of the statute of limitations on those crimes?
I think he's had a lawyer give him some tips on what it's safe to tread on and what you can't.
I did get an email from him,
and
he has agreed to be interviewed.
But how are you?
It would have to be scheduled when he comes to the UK, because he's been to. He spoke at, I think it's Oxford or Cambridge, and he's done interviews here before.
Well, he does guest speaking and all of that kind of stuff anyway. So yeah, I think there'd be quite a bit of interest there.
It's odd that with my criminal record I can't go to all these countries.
Oh yes, that still haunts you.
Well, how can he go to all these countries?
Yeah, curious.
Yeah.
But there might be a way around that, Shaun. But anyway,
I do know ways around it, but no more felonies.
Misdemeanor? No. Okay. Flying boat from Miami. Anyway. Yeah. But amongst the people I knew that made yet another retirement less straightforward, are the class of people that I call orphans. Have you ever had somebody around you or within your little group that you ask yourself, how the hell did he ever get part of this thing? Who introduced him? And what the hell does he do that ever works? Such a well-intentioned, like a puppy, always staring up at you. But if you so much as sent him to the corner shop for a packet of cigarettes, 2 hours later you've got the police calling you saying, you know, there's multiple pile-up and he's been indicted for cigarette laundering or something.
Wildman was quite good purifying those people, let's say.
Oh, right. Well, that's another alternative.
We would cast them off quite quickly.
But it's always served me badly. If somebody hasn't really done anything wrong to me, I don't mind paying them off. But they're sticky orphans. They want to get into your life and mess around it. And the desperately needy, by the way, are very, they got encyclopedic memories of anything you might have written down. This guy turned out, Billy Green was his name. I mean, Thomas, for example, in Stockholm, very straightforward to retire off. Introduced him to somebody else, so he still got his little commissions. But he didn't take care of himself. When I'd visit there, I'd stop at a supermarket, get cat litter, cat food, a whole lot of food for him, sort out his refrigerator. He just kind of neglected himself. But the dangerous orphan is the Billy Green type. Billy Green was a Liverpudlian failed boxer who ended up arrested in Thailand for running around with forged US currency that was done in Malaysia. Quite a big forgery capital, Kuala Lumpur. They do a lot of that. Well, he did me a favor once over a passport, and did I owe him? Not really. I paid him well enough. But how do you want out, Billy? I said. Well, of course, he found love in his own way in a bar room somewhere in the Philippines and showed me all these pictures of some village girl tattered up like, I don't know, a dog and a pony contest or something. And I said, well, where does all this go? Oh, she wants, I want to get a house in her village and, kind of racking up what this is going to cost. I said, look, 20,000 is it, for you've got me a couple of passports, great, fine. But this is it. I'll give you that. But can't I want to run my own thing. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. He couldn't play a game of snap with a 5-year-old. I don't know what he meant by running his own thing.
He wants to outshine the master.
Well, I rang around and there was somebody in Denmark who said, well, if he brings me a few couriers, I'll give him a commission. And that was it. So I gave him the usual rules. Billy, don't write things down, don't keep a diary, yada, 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 yada. This is what you've got to do. Don't start running around with this shit yourself because you're not cut out for it. You look like a big lump quivering as you transported through an airport. No wonder those dollars went astray. Yeah, Dave. Yeah. So where are you going to be living? Oh, the moon, as far as you're concerned. But so I kind of forgot about him. But things were going pretty good with Eloise. I'd finally got her to travel. She had a phobia, by the way, against aircraft. And she had, what was another phobia? One night we were out someplace and there was a few drunks. Well, I set her down somewhere because if the drunks went over the top, I didn't want her seeing anything too nasty because that would make me seem like, some desperado or something. So I said, you look that way. I'll just talk to the chaps. They're a bit happy tonight. Well, I kind of tricked him anyway. I had from my workshop, I had this thing that sounded incredibly like a gun being cocked.
Is this your lessons in the uselessness of guns?
Yeah, this is number 6 or 7, I think, at this stage. If I had a real gun, what am I going to shoot? Some drunk in London? There's cameras everywhere. And you can't shoot just the one. What are you going to do with the 2 witnesses? Sorry, guys, not looking good for you two. Want to do each other and time is on the march. I've got a very skittish girlfriend around the corner. The sound of gunshots and then me running around cleaning my hands and throwing something into the Thames and then saying, no, Eloise, all's fine. They just wanted directions. That's right. Yeah. Any big rocks around here and some twine? So yeah, they weren't so far gone that they would have fought me anyway, regardless of a gun. Some are like that, but the one was sober enough to call it a day. But I came back and she was still neurotic, So I thought, well, I've got to keep this kind of stuff to a minimum. But then something came up. I got a call from His Lordship, Nurjan Magsi. He was in prison over something or other. I think somebody had gone missing or found decorated on a bridge or something like that. But as always, not something he couldn't get out of. But while I was there, his cousin, whose name's Iftikhar, used to show me around. Tell me, how are we doing for time, by the way?
Yeah, we're fine. 11:30.
Okay, good. Because little Iftikhar was a teacher, really, but because his uncle was who he was, of course, if uncle said, if you go and do such and such, he did it. Iftikhar has gone missing somewhere over the Afghanistani border. Now, I figured this whole story, which I'm hearing through that call shop that used to be in South Kensington on the corner there, near the tube station. That was a busy little call shop. Russians on everything. Imagine somebody's in one of those booths on a phone and they got 3 mobiles there, switching from one to the other. So anyway, I'm hearing this story and thinking, from one of the family, one of the guys with Nurjan's outfit. I'm thinking, well, how much is this going to cost? Cut to the chase. But I also knew another thing about Pakistan. whoever you send the money to, that's their gift from God. That's their bounty. It doesn't go anywhere past there. You can't, and there's nothing you can do. Countless people I know have sent money over there and it's just disappeared, even from the people they were doing business with. And I asked an old friend there, why is it so? Well, we kind of figure if somebody sends you money, it's a gift. But what if it's linked to some business arrangement? Oh, they'll come and we'll do the business, but not that money. That's the gift. So I thought, well, if I'm going to just waste money, I can do it, but it won't resolve anything. I'll have to go. So I said to Eloise, I'll be away for 2 weeks tops. I'm really digging my grave here, aren't I? So I did all the precautions, figuring that might bring me some good luck. Hid sets of keys to places, paid out rents in advance on other 2 flats in the Muse house. Went to the bank and made sure the storage deposit box was paid up for 10 years or the most they would take. So really planning for the worst. Had 2 absolutely clean passports. Nothing wrong with those. One I was keeping in reserve. I mean, there's no reason for any of this to come to anything. But I'm taking extra precautions because if you don't do it, then you'll need it. So now, I've never really gone into much detail about Pakistan because it's so hard to understand. It is not it's a name of a country, but that's not what's there. Where the British Empire was and where India is, it's hundreds, if not more, of different communities, different little worlds with their own thing. So that even though it's homogenizing a bit and unifying, in the modern world, its roots are certainly not that way. So when trying to figure out what's going on and where it is, you very much have to take into account what are the kind of people you're dealing with. So, okay, I went into Pakistan. Of course, I don't stay at a hotel. I stayed with my friend in Lahore. I love McMillan town. It's kind of middle class, you could say. In their own small way, they have their own domestic mischief. They don't actually pay for their electricity. The gas meter's completely rigged. They've all sunk wells down in their back garden. But there is no back garden because they own the land. They built the damn thing into like those concrete blocks right to the road. And come to think of it, we'll take a bit of that road. We'll take the footpath. That's not enough. We'll take some of the road itself. Encroachment, they call it. While I was staying with my friend, the electricity would go out. And I'd go into the street and talk to the neighbours. Oh, it's terrible, Mr. David, yes. They're all thieves, but we know that you've got your own hot wiring on there. Have you ever seen the cables that are all tangled up in the just massive wires? Just you couldn't even find your way through it. All the big fuses, that's why it keeps blowing. All the big fuses have been nicked, sold on, and a bit of copper piping have been shoved back in there, even if they're 1 inch diameter and about 6 inches long. So, one neighbour was a low-ranking customs officer. Another one was at some marriage hall. It's kind of local meeting place. They're all upstanding local citizens. And when I said, look, we'll go down to the electricity board. Yes, we should. We'll go down there and see what's going on. And they all melted away. And my friend Adnan said, look, they've all got something to hide. So I had a lot of lessons there about how to approach things, but I had plenty more to learn. Adnan gave me his crappy old Browning gun.
So who is Adnan?
He was a guy I met years ago, and he was in Australian prison. arrested for there, had Australian passport, but had returned there, and we'd done a little business, and he'd built a house. So though he wasn't in the business, we stayed friends. And I'm not going near any hotel. It is not the kind of place. If you go to a cheap hotel, they're all over you for local reasons. If you go to an expensive one, all the spooks and the agencies and the higher level police, they want to know what you're doing. Unless they can satisfy their curiosity, they're going to make it their business to find out. So you can't go to the Hyatt or even the Marriott there. I knew a guy a few years ago who was sent by some London villains to sort out an already disastrous deal. He put himself in the Hyatt and was arrested 3 weeks later. I didn't go to see Nurjan because whatever he would tell me would be, as much as he loved his cousin, he would have distracted me in his own little thing. So I thought I'll go up north where Iftikhar was last seen. And they had he was supposedly sent up there on a smuggling scheme, which involves it's the Afghan trade agreement. It works like this. Afghanistan has got no port. So if somebody's importing something from the outside world into Afghanistan and it lands at Karachi port, that container is sealed up and it's sent through. There's no duties or taxes to be paid on it. It's meant to be paid once it gets to Afghanistan. In reality, television sets, washing machines, all sorts of stuff comes in that way, gets across the border, is unpacked and sent straight back into Pakistan, where all those taxes are avoided. Now, that almost sounded like pretty straightforward business, so he shouldn't have really gone missing over that, but things do happen. I went from Lahore to kind of traveling more or less on my own. The next person to meet was Cameron, who was supposed to be his driver when he went missing. Nice guy. He was one of Nurjan's top men, but he was being a bit evasive about it. And somebody else, when I got to Peshawar, I took the old Grand Trunk Road, which goes through there. It's really nice at night. You have these massive trucks with painting and decoration and jangling bells and little good luck things. I mean, I know it's supposed to be Muslim, but they still have all the Hindu gods to appease. So truck drivers don't take any chances when it comes to pandering to some god. They'll cover the lot. And it would kind of look like a trail of elephants on circus parade going through the night with all of these places. I found one man who had a better idea, who was an Afridi. Now, the Afridi tribe, as it were, is another clan. They don't have territorial ambitions. They're generally pale-skinned, stocky. This got a reputation for being very astute businessmen. Kind of sometimes spoken of as the Jews of northern Pakistan, meaning they're very clannish and good at business and support each other. So usually a very good source of information. I managed to get from him something that was true enough, that Nurjan had found better uses for the money, for all the goods that were sent over there. So his cousin was grabbed until payment was settled for that, because the goods had already gone. Unfortunately, Afghanistan at the time was even more lawless than usual. It had just been through the Russians had left, and something resembling kind of governments had come and gone, and the Taliban were just emergent at the time. So I crossed into Afghanistan by taking that windy road through the Khyber Pass. But you don't go through the main border checkpoint because you probably won't make it. They'll just be so curious what you're doing. Doesn't matter what papers you've got. So you take the hole in the fence, which is 500 rupees down the road. Switch taxis a couple of times. I detail all this in my book, so if people want to navigate around that kind of thing, there's quite a few tips about that. You've got to ditch these taxi drivers because they'll have ambitions on you. And I also I'd bought a Pakistani passport a couple of years earlier, which you might think, well, that's not going to work. Well, there's about 20,000 pale-skinned people who are the biologically the cast-offs or from the British Raj era who have kept English-sounding names and yet are Pakistan citizens during the transition. Their kids sort of kept it up. So it's not absolutely out of the question that Frank Engineer or John Martin or something could be a Pakistan citizen.
What's striking me here is you've escaped from Thai death row. You've got this operation going, money coming in. You got a good amount of money. Met a nice woman, Eloise, and you live in kind of you got a good degree of security. Now you're in post-Russian occupation, Pakistan, Afghanistan, where you could die at any moment. Security is gone.
Well, I know you're
swing. I can feel my tension rising as you're telling me this.
I know
swing from the safety to now something bad could happen and is going to happen.
Bear in mind that sometimes I'd been back to Pakistan a couple of times, and then I'd come back to Eloise and I'd think of an interesting story about you wouldn't believe it. A truck blew up that was meant for somebody else, and I think I can't tell her that one. That's not good. Or you ever found a hand landing on your lunch? No, definitely can't tell it. Oh, yeah. Oh, I've got to tell you a beauty about all that later on. Yeah.
David is just setting the table for what's about to happen next, and we're nearly at the 2 hours, but keep going.
Okay. I'll have to cut through a few things here. But I had to, when I got through, bear in mind this is back in 1990. 98, the mobile network almost doesn't exist. In the big cities in Pakistan, the Jazz network was up and running, but the government would close it down from time to time. But people had cell phones, and there wasn't much doing in Afghanistan, but a lot of the traders would cross over with their cell phones to get onto the Peshawar network, which was within range. And somebody enterprising had put a transponder near Jalalabad, so it picked up some signals. Otherwise, people used these PCO, public call offices. You went there, you paid some money, they had different phones to call through people. But I needed some help in all of this. So if we go back 16, 17 years earlier, one of my Thai contact, Lee's family, met him when he was a teenager, and it was all very westernized. They had sort of like westernized music. He used to call me Leo Sayer for some reason. I had that hair out to there. And he was around with his friend Sayed, even though he called himself Abdul. I mean, there's no point keeping track of any of these names because they all changed it. And the reason Sayed was now Abdul is because he had to kind of blend in. The young guys were starting to wear all this black tunic stuff. And they were all, in Jalalabad, it was a big bus junction transport point. And this was where the Afridi told me that Iftikhar, the cousin, was being held when he last heard anything about it. Did I want him? No, I said to the Afridi. Look, I'm here on some other business. I just met the family in London. They just want to know if he's all right. That's all. If I can talk to him, fine. So Lee's family guys that have grown up by now, they met me there. And now they brought guns, of course, but there was this thing where if you carry it in a bag, you're not planning on blowing somebody away. But if you've got it shouldered, it kind of means something else. These are all these kind of little signals between each other as to what it means. Personally, I can't see what's the point of having it in a bag. If it kicks off, you're going to be the loser. Just give me a minute. Drawstring, catchy thing,
So let me just get this clear. The guy you're trying to find, you've ascertained that his cousin has been kidnapped, and you're now asking...
Nurjan, my tribal lord friend, his cousin's been kidnapped or taken hostage over money that was not paid, and he's being held by somebody that was tied up with the smuggling operation.
And you're about to meet the armed kidnappers now, on the pretext that you just want to see
I've said to
that this guy's okay.
My friend connections there from family back in Thailand. Look, this is the position. So what do you want him? Even I wasn't going to tell I wanted him. It would have changed the dynamic completely. They're starting to talk about big money then.
And what protection have you got going in this situation to think that you might not get kidnapped?
The bagman seldom is. I always remember an operator from who went into Somalia years ago, worked for one of the ABC network, and they had to set up the broadcast. So you remember those pictures of the Marines landing on the beach, their night vision goggles being blinded.
Gulf War I.
By well, it was part of the Somalia operation, and in a Black Hawk Down era thing. Why do you think the news networks were all set up there to film the arrival of the Marines when they're supposed to be invading? Because they had the bagmen go in. And the bagmen go in and with 2 suitcases full of money. And my friend who worked that job said, look, you arrive, you're going to lose that. Fine, that's perfectly all right. But you say to them, oh, the strongest of you, help yourself. But there's more coming. And it will, but I need some things. What property? Well, the Saudis got out of town in a hurry, so their whole embassy was up for rent, sale, whatever, takeover. It had a generator in there, so ABC Network took that one and set the satellites on the roof. The bagman, the fixer, said, flew in some more money, and after there was a bit of discussion amongst the warlord groups, you can imagine, that was deafening. The survivors came back into to see the bag and said, well, we're your security team. And they said, well, what's the matter? Why is the water not working here? And so they'd fix all that and put the electricity on, for crying out loud. I want to get something to it. So they were sending their men off to fix all this and dreaming of these suitcases full of money. They had to fly in some suitcases because the airport was all knackered and it had been bombed or something by the Americans. The only flights, there was still 10 planes a day coming in long hops from the other side of Africa by, you know what they were carrying? Cat. Yeah. And those cat smugglers were the only people with a functioning airline. So the fixers got that. So if I'm in some weird, messed up place, I always thought, no. I mean, when we started out years ago, my friends and I, it was, you had to be able to go into a place and take some control of it. You couldn't be fearful and run away and be all Western and chicken-hearted about it. Besides, if you keep in their minds the story in play, their future, you look like I tell you what, I wish you could come to London with me, because that's it. They're daydreaming of all sorts of things. They're not going to kill you. They're going to kill anybody who looks at you. That's what they're going to do. So anyway, my two guys have made a couple of calls, and some people have turned up. We're in the back of a public call office, which is the only place for a bit of privacy. There was a guest house, there was somewhere else, but this was the only thing. And the owner of it went away and left us in peace. I half thought he might even turn up, for a quick sale. But no. And I really knew then that the guys who'd arrived didn't have him. And I said to my friends there, look, just please tell me what they say, translate, and don't add anything.
So you've got one person protecting you with you?
Yeah, or two.
Two people,
yeah,
okay.
He and his friend. And
how many of them are there?
On the other side, just two.
Okay.
Two each. So it's balanced. But I noticed the guns have somehow lost their bags. But they're nicely propped up in a civilized sort of way. And we're kind of getting along. I said, look, I just want to talk to him. I want to be able to say to his sister. And I pulled out some Afghanis, which is the local currency. By the way, if you're ever doing business in some dump, don't start waving around euros, pounds, or US dollars. No. Change them up no matter what, because they're used to the local money no matter how devalued it is. You start bringing something exotic in, ups their daydream level, doesn't it? How much more has he got on him? Should we just eat him now and take what's left? None of that. So
your bargaining power is reduced if you're bartering for items of clothes on your summer holiday. That's what David's trying to say here.
Oh yes. And also, of course, I'm saying, look, I've got other business to do here. Oh, what? Never mind. It turned out that he'd been, because the money wasn't paid, he was sold on to somebody else, connected with the Taliban people.
So these guys didn't even have him anymore?
Didn't even have him. They were just seeing what they could get. I gave them about 500 pounds in Afghanis, just to see what information. But Said was getting angry with them because he was seeing through them. And I told him, don't get angry with them. I won't get to learn anything. I need as much information as possible. And got one of them to agree to contact the new people that had him. They didn't call him that. Our friends are holding him. So because his mobile didn't work, we were too far away from the border. He looked at his phone and then got the number and went to the public call office button. So everybody's happy now. That it's going to be later, and tomorrow. No, can't be tomorrow, later tonight. That's fine. And I went and had a little nap, changed my clothes out the back. I thought it was good that they're getting on. I heard laughing, lots of table slapping and getting along well. Then ridiculously deafening sound as they were celebrating something. The way they fire their guns into the air to conclude a deal and all of that. These bastards, why inside a building? Are they out of their mind? You can't hear anything, Shaun. It's just absolutely deafening. Well, there was a lull in all that, so I thought I'd better go in and shut them up, and it's drawing attention to us by some other who knows what. As I walked into the room, it looked like somebody had dropped 10 bags of talcum powder in the air. This white dust was floating down, and I couldn't even work out. Remember, I'm still half deaf. Well, did this come from outside? Then I realized, wait a minute, there was only 2 small windows up on top. And then as the air cleared a bit, I realized it was bullets going into the walls, the cheap plasterwork, that had set off all of this dust everywhere. No movement of these red rags on the floor, except for one who had his leg twisted up underneath him. My friend, clearly out to it, had those, the eyes are just little slits like that, just a little bit open. couldn't really work out who'd started it or what it was over. But my hearing's starting to come back. And we'll call them the bad guys just to distinguish the kidnapper side. He was under the table, and I had a look around because at least I had the presence of mind to remember that it was his phone that had the number that counted in this mess. And he had, it looked like a white mask on his face, but it was actually the cartilage of his nose where a bullet had gone right through. And this strange temptation to poke my finger into it. I don't know why. Anyway, I had other things to think about then. There was one, I had Adnan's old Browning, which I left on display a bit, but I think the one that had a little bit of movement in him, he wasn't long for this world. You know, when the blood's coming out in blobs, that doesn't go on all night. A few minutes at best. But this is not the place to be. Somebody owns this call office, and this guy's going to be well pissed at finding everything. But the only thing I did with that gun was shoot the telephone, the call office one, because it last made that call to the next layer onwards. And I've got the mobile phone that's got the number on it, so at least I've got that. It was a funny old phone too. Anyway, that's a technical story. Interesting way it worked. So I got out of there, out the back way. I switched back into Western clothes because I wouldn't seem like previously I'd been like one of the guys, and realized then that I'd been going wrong about this whole thing entirely. Because I was settled in London with Eloise, I was inviting trouble by not taking a sensible approach to the whole thing. So I jumped into the aircon taxis and went to Kabul. It was better. I didn't want to go backwards in this. And I had a number. But this was not somebody I wanted to call. Exactly. Stayed at the Park Hotel. Now, the Kabul was a real mess by then. They'd fought over various things and the place was all smashed up. A couple of hours now into this thing, and I hope you're still with us. One of the often found questions from viewers is, how do you find the kind of people you need in countries about which you know almost nothing and have few contacts? I detail that, but I don't know whether I actually pointed out that you go to the sort of places where you might expect to find locals wanting to meet foreigners just to know what to avoid. Those are not the people you really want. The kind of people you want are actually well settled into their local society. So really get involved in local society things. Maybe some good works, yes, but keep away from the religious stuff. But I don't think I have to tell you that. Anyway, make yourself a brew of some kind to sustain you through another hour of part 5. I'll see you soon. It's how can I, in 2 seconds, summarize the history of it? They've gone through 5 governments, 2 different kinds of flags. The party, the loyal to the old king's gone. The Russians have left a bit of a legacy. In fact, the time of the Russians back in '92 was the best it had ever had. Women were in universities then. That's why these Taliban got all pissed, see? They used to watch these girls, dress smart, getting better grades than they were. Sexual tension, that's what's behind the whole Taliban movement. Yeah, they'll pay. When my beard grows, they'll pay one day, bitches. So this is, the genesis of, never mind all the politics and religion, that's a lot of tosh. That doesn't mean anything. I had a night at the park. The only other people staying there were some Unocal oil men, Americans. I noticed they had their own little crew of locals as minders. They had some gas pipeline that, I mean, people did business with the Taliban, ran government. It was still a couple of years away from the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue Against Vice. I think that's what it translated as. And I needed to remember the next step, and it's always worth remembering, when things don't go your way, dump everything behind you, get fresh stuff, fresh people. Yes. And where could I find them? There was a street called Scribe Street, or known as that, behind the ruins of the old court building. People would sit there on kind of fold-up card tables and handle documents for people. They'd write letters for them, deal with official forms, type out stuff. There were 4 people there. One had a woman dressed like a Ninja Turtle in front of him, and a pile of papers, and typing away at something. Another man had virtually nothing, but he was sitting there eating something and looking around, keen for business. And another one it looked like he was hanging on to the last vestiges of civilization in his 60 years. But the one I chose was none of those. He was the one who had a couple of paperback books. He was reading something. They had tags in them. He was dressed in just a plain tunic, but clean, youngish, looked a sort of thoughtful type. See, all the rest were either failures or had ambitions or were linked to people that I wouldn't want to know, like broken officials or the remnants of the new lot or informers. This one showed some hope, and then he had the same name as I did, but localized Dawood. So I said I needed a translator and I don't know. I wanted some business I wanted to do. So he kind of brightened up at that, and I asked him about how he ran his little stall and chit-chatted, made arrangements to meet him the next day. But I noticed as soon as I left, somebody, the fat one, went off to make trouble with somebody, find out who I was. But the one I liked quietly packed up and left, but only because he didn't like the others seeing that he'd met me. You know, the ridiculous, subtle dynamics of all of this. But I had what I wanted. I had somebody new who was outside of it. And I said that I had this telephone number, and I'd come to buy antiquities, the older the better. And I knew that they were using bulldozers to dig them up. So that was my cover story, that I wanted things, pre-Islamic art, Gandharan statues from the Greco-Indian period. After Alexander left, some of his command didn't last very long, but some of the breakup of his empire, that Greek influence stayed all right up to the borders of India. So there was some artworks to be had around there, and it seemed to me a good cover, disreputable enough to be believable, not too financially rewarding to go insane, but still profitable for everybody, and of no interest to anybody in the political world. So I then managed to get, I got my translator to ring the number, because I said I'd been given this as a contact with antiquities. Turned out his name was Mansour. He was, my translator came back and said, oh yes, he thinks he can get what you want from the museum. It's like a museum's a shop there, isn't it? It's not like the museum has a shop. The museum is a shop. You buy what you want. But this little Dawood, the translator, seemed a bit sad about all this, the Afghani treasures leaving the country. But he wasn't being critical of me. So I met Mansour the next day. Very interesting guy. He'd been in some technical department of the legitimate Afghan Air Force. And when the Taliban came in, there was about 6 aircraft that could actually do anything. All Russian jets and whatnot were around. So they had to keep people that knew how to run the systems on. They couldn't be just idiots. So that he still was actually on a government wage. But looking around his house, I insisted on a home meeting because you can tell so much. Not just from the disposition of his family, but the mementos, the things that he's had. Man of wide-ranging things. And I said to him, oh, by the way, I had a translator a while back. His name was Iftikhar, a Pakistani boy. I haven't been able to find him. And he said to me, as though suddenly realizing, but not quite, that there might be more to this, he said, that's the second time this week I've heard that name. I thought, this is good. If he's as civilized as I take him for, this could turn out well. So, I made my arrangements for a Bactrian coin, an old stamp seal. These were the things I used to roll across clay tablets, and sort of left an image there. There was one of the piece too. I think it was a little scene that was a carving, Gandharan, so it had a mixture of the Greek art in it. And I said to myself, oh, by the way, I heard this Iftikhar's in trouble. Keep his family happy. How much for the boy? So I got the statue I was really interested in for 6,000, and got Iftikhar was offered for 4,000. So the Gandharan art was worth a lot more than him. And apparently not, just as well I'd changed course because he hadn't paid up and hadn't been very cooperative. They were going to send him to an attack on Mazar Sharif up north just before Taliban took their revenge on Hazara. Kind of like, how the Russians used to use prisoners for clearing mines. He would have been first wave in that and sort of gone. Now it gets even, now remember that Kabul is a wreck. There's the Royal Palace is a mess. It's just a skeletal frame. There's only a few hotels with enough generators to function. Very few foreigners around. Even at least one thing, DA couldn't possibly be on my case there. They were not going to do it. Ended up picking as the meeting place the only, what would you say, new build, modern, air-conditioned glass and steel place in the whole town. What was it? Some Italian company had a demented idea of setting up a fiber optic network as a forerunner to offering telephone exchanges to the new Taliban government because they were being accepted. Can't beat them, join them. That hadn't turned out well, but the building was there and the air conditioning worked. And so I went in sitting around control desks as Mansour came in, and I had in brown paper and string my bits of artwork. And little Iftikhar was then let in. And he looked a bit shameful, like he'd done something wrong, poor kid. But he had these bruises and he walked with a kind of internal injury lilt to one side. I thought, I would have liked to have a little word with the guys who brought him in. Would love to. But you can't get carried away on emotional grounds. I dismissed that. Oh, Iftikhar, you naughty boy. Where were you? I had you here last time. What have you been doing? Brawling in the street or something? Anyway, sit there. I've got things to do. So, and of course, there's big promises about what next I want to do and bring money and do things in here. So everybody is kind of placated for the moment. But I said to Dawood, did you get that new place? I told him to rent another house on the northern side of Kabul. All right. and we just disappeared into all of that. I left Mansour. I'm sure they tried to follow, but Mansour, the Air Force technical guy, they had something to settle with him, so that kept them busy. Argument over the money, no doubt, and the disposition of it. So then we got away. We got a really crap old Japanese car, Subaru or something, and I thought, if the guy wanted to go down where he was familiar, Baluchistan, cross over the border that way, no, it was just enough weather left to go up north. So we did. And went through Spin Boldak, and they've got some very strange towns there. Roads that were really only roads on a map or nothing. Saw some Nuristanis. They were the pale-skinned, blue-eyed ones from up there. You know, the legend has it that they're, of course, Alexander's army had sired that lot. And they were pagan up until as recently as 100 years ago, when they had forced conversions. Anyway, I don't believe all that. The Nazis did, of course. They sent a whole lot of people out that way looking to prove that the Aryan race had noble origins. Oh, there's nothing worse than a parvenu nouveau riche dictator and Hitler type than wanting to prove, noble ancestry, is there? People do that. So, okay, I sent Iftikhar back to Karachi. Daoud went back and he said, what about your antiquities? I said, that new place you got, anybody know it? No. Okay, put them under the bed there. That's the best place for them. I wasn't going to travel around with that. And I didn't go and see Noor John. I was a bit annoyed with him at the time for letting it come to this. Rang up Eloise, said, no, yeah, thanks, fine, because I just said a friend had a little bit of a problem and didn't mention about shootouts and Wild West border towns and Jalalabad. It's hard to tell that story in mixed company, isn't it? So everything's pretty good, but I'm still covering all the bases. I even had my friend Adnan take me to the airport at Lahore, which is a funny way of mixing the international and domestic flights together. Just dropped a bit of padding. The memory of what's about to happen next is so strong, it's influencing the very structure of the studio, Shaun. Yes.
It's going to get darker than it's ever been.
So there's nothing wrong with me, but I'm saying I've got the creeps. I said, I'd rather be in the Wild West of Afghanistan with a gun that doesn't work than right here in Lahore. Everything's fine. I don't see any bad faces out there. I said, you hang about. And I told him even to bring some official with him, somebody from immigration ministry or some government hack, because I've got my passport and there's nothing wrong with it. So I don't know what. But I'm nervous, So it was Eloise. I wanted to get back in a hurry. I should have taken the long way. Anyway, I get into the airport. Everything's fine. I pick an idiot for the customs man. He's fine. Two other guys are over there looking at something under their desk. They're looking at a document, but quickly, like a document. Makes you think it's a picture, doesn't it? Yeah. They don't even put up pictures of fleeing dictators in that part of the world. They don't put up pictures of anybody else. So they come over, want to see my passport. Still okay. It's genuine. Perfectly, nothing wrong with it. Then the other one's saying to them, to hell with it, let's go. Our shift ends. And the other one, no, but look at it. It's got to be the same. And they showed me, what do you think? Now, there is one thing in this world, in some slightly out of control country, you do not want to see if you're in the hands of officials who can do you harm. You don't want to be shown a colour, mind you, expensive, colour photocopy or an A4 sheet of the very same picture that is in your passport with bits of scotch tape all over it like it's been under there for a week and a half. Yeah. But do I worry? No. My loyal friends are outside. Sure, they're Pakistani, but they don't mind a bit of trouble, a bit of rough and tumble. I managed to convince these guys to take me out to they held on to me a bit, to the forecourt where the people are giving farewell to the passengers, to find my friends. And for sure something would have been sorted, because one's already on my side. A resemblance, a similarity, he's saying. But it's absolutely the same picture. It's not even like another picture of me. It's the same picture. Where are they? Where's Adnan? Bolted. Ministry of Information, whatever it was. Immigration, shot through. First sign of trouble. And left there. What's this about? Who is it? Oh, some people want to see you. I'm bundled off somewhere. I've got no chance of getting out. I'm starting to spiral here in Spiral Studios, and there too, because this is out of hand. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sent down to it's a Sunday. I'm sent down to a deserted office in town, put in a cell. Some police from Karachi want to see me. I try to even get out of this dirty mud hut cell thing while these police from Karachi are coming. There's some poor kid in there. I said, what's it like, the police here? Oh, police here, they torture, like he was saying, the sun rises in the morning. But if you pay them money, you pay them money, a little torture. And that's where we leave it in part 5, where I've been arrested in Lahore, and I'm about to face something that I really wasn't expecting. I thought I could deal myself out of any trouble in Pakistan very easily. They seem to be friendly enough, but what follows next is quite horrendous. That's in part 6, and if you can't wait for my screening of it, you can always go to Shaun's channel. After all, I think he's got a whole playlist of my stuff there. Oh, in a real hurry, you can always read the damn book. Still, why do that? I mean, you can get it for free from YouTube, or pay premium and you don't even get the ads. So what follows next here will be some answers to questions posed by viewers, sometimes kind of right off the field, but often quite to the point. You'll see what I mean. Great.
Should we go over to the questions now, David? I think this is the climax to end this one on.
Yes, that's true. Because who I see next, really have to give some background to, so we should do that.
Okay, let's do that then.
Okay.
So you've got a lot of questions here from your followers that I've printed out. But the first question is from me. It's one of the hottest subjects in news and on YouTube right now.
Right.
And there's new developments every couple of days with this Jeffrey Epstein character. He's facing a life sentence. He got a pass when he was arrested for these things, I think it was 10 years ago. They said basically to him, we'll just give you a charge for soliciting prostitution, and you can have to do a year in jail, and most of that will be work release. After he had groomed all these young underage girls to do all this elite paedophile stuff.
Oh, it wasn't one of the princes from here, one of his friends as well.
Prince Andrew, even after he was convicted and got released against the wishes of the rest of the royal family, Prince Andrew went and spent days with Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently they got a very strong friendship and relationship.
I wonder how it's holding.
Well, now he's been re-indicted. I think it's a different state, so it's not double jeopardy. The victims were outraged because when they were told years ago that he was now only getting done for soliciting prostitution, what did that make them?
Yeah. Co-conspirators in a way.
And prostitutes.
Oh, yes.
So, these were underage girls who were groomed by this malicious paedophile.
I did see a photograph of him about, from, I think, 20 years ago at some party. And he was with, we'll clean it up by saying a girlfriend, a date for the night.
Yeah.
She did seem about 14 or so.
Yeah.
I mean, let's try and defend the indefensible. they were very young girls, underage girls. I don't think we can put him in the same category as somebody who's downloading, pre-teens from Manila or something like that. But in serious bother,
He had Clinton, Bill Clinton took numerous flights, and Clinton's come out and made a statement. It's obvious from his statement there's some guilt here resonating here for him to come out and make this statement.
The stained dress of Bill Clinton.
Epstein facing life in prison, and he said he's going to name up to 5 names. So do you think they will whack him? Because he already got found. They didn't know whether it was a suicide attempt or beaten up. He already got found on the floor in a mess with injuries. Do you think that was a warning, perhaps, to him in the prison system?
Where are they holding him? Any idea? Or somewhere on protection, I guess.
Is this a New York case, or was it a New York case that he got?
Well, I mean, he'd have to be on some level of protection, I presume. That wouldn't necessarily, as you know, there's no guarantee of anything. You only have to go down to the medical center or en route to somewhere else, and then you can have a chance encounter in the corridor, which doesn't turn out well.
Stairs.
Yeah, dangerous places, stairs in prison.
Do you think if he's got the goods on such powerful people, he's going to last long?
Was the statement that he's going to speak on 5 well-known people, was that attributed to him, or as far as you know, he actually said it?
I saw it as a media headline, and another media headline is that he has recordings of these sexual situations with the underage girls with powerful people. He has recordings of them.
Well, it does kind of make you wonder how it's got to this stage, if he has that. You'd think if enough powerful people had dirt that they wanted kept secret, they would have done everything within their power to protect him.
Do you think it's to do with the change in the guard in politics in America then? Because I think it was...
You mean because of the Trump era?
Yeah, was it Obama's federal prosecutors that gave him a pass? Well, the prosecutor that gave him a pass is presently on Trump's team. I think he was the Labour Secretary or something, and he's just lost his job over this for giving him the pass.
Yeah, everything comes back to haunt people in this. I mean, the Clintons... If you look at the history of these things, I mean, even going back to Bill Wyman or Roman Polanski, things that people could get away with used to sometimes come out, and then they do more or less harm. I mean, in Polanski's case, the girl involved said she regrets ever bringing it up. But now it's so easy for prosecutions to go ahead and somebody to keep promoting it. They're just not so easy to kill off. People can say if you're rich, but just as importantly in the US, have the goods on somebody or some power over others, cases can be buried. But if they're very public like this one, it would be a battle to find somebody in any government office who would willingly let it go. Because, as you say, look what happens to people who intercede on his behalf. I think he underestimated his power. I think he had an arrogance that his position and his friendships would utterly protect him. So he didn't take steps to bury the output of information or whatever was needed, or pay off the right girls or whatever. And now he doesn't look so well anymore, does he? He looks quite... I mean, he's not a young guy, but he looks quite haggard. I think in some ways he doesn't seem like... If we had lunch with him, he'd probably be entertaining enough to talk to, but I think he'd be certainly very arrogant. And I don't know, I can't get too worked up over people dating underage girls when the historically people... I mean, who was that musician who married a 13-year-old quite legally?
Well, Pablo Escobar, his wife was 13 when he met her.
Yes, when he met her.
He was, I think, 11 years older.
Oh, almost the same. But it is a kind of slightly prim world we're in when it comes to things. That people live such public lives that and vulnerable teenagers who haven't got enough experience of life don't realize they're going into a trap. They think it's so wonderful being with these rich and famous guys, but they won't be able to deal with the position that, quite unfairly, prosecutors and others, supposedly doing good, push them into. I mean, if people as a teenager have done something they later regret, they'd much prefer it never came out than have to stand up in an open court and go through nights and details and who touched who where and all of that. But I don't think, before we started recording, we were talking about Kevin Spacey. He's, what was it, groped a couple of boys or something. He still hasn't been forgiven for that, even though the case is withdrawn against him. This is, and currently, and is likely to stay so for a while, becomes one of the unforgivable crimes or which of social interaction that, and of course, being arrogant and rich, he kind of made himself a target. I don't think he's going to get any smarter. I think things will just get worse for him.
Yeah.
I think if he was going to make any move to save himself from the worst of it, he would have figured it out by now. But I think it's snowballed out of his control.
So he's in under his head. He's going to drown in the system. And it is sad that the victims
they just get trampled on the wayside.
Re-victimized and trampled on. And it is brave of the ones to speak out against such powerful people. All right, next question is from Amelia Booth Ferris. Hi, David. Have read both your books. Thought they were brilliant.
Good to hear that rather than incomprehensible.
Links for David's books in the description box. Do you have any more books in the pipeline?
Amelia, I do. I've got... I had an idea of writing something about some Russians that we'll meet later on in these interviews. It was a Moscow street gang that hijacked a plane and ended up in Pakistan. Their downfall and little history, I thought, would make quite a good book. But I think I'm kind of done with autobiography. But what can I write where I can't use the real names, but some very interesting stuff has happened? I can write crime fiction, which I intend to do, about somebody I met who was, he lived in Canada and he used to cross over the border. He was a fixer for crooks' other problems, a bit like Winston Wolfe in Pulp Fiction was a comic book character and a good one, but nonetheless not very real. But this guy used to actually handle some very strange things, including some guys who were stuck in a vault in Marseille. And as long as I call it fiction, I can tell those stories.
That was the way.
They shouldn't get upset.
That's how Howard Marks. That's what he did, didn't he? Towards the end of his life, he crossed over to fiction.
Oh, did he?
And he said, "I've got all these stories. I don't want to get people in trouble, so I'll fictionalize."
He was a slow learner in that case. He certainly didn't mind ratting a few people out early in the career.
Okay, so Matt 1 has asked, David, I'm curious where you stand in regards to the guilt aspect of trafficking drugs. Do you lean more towards the side which says that, yes, you are ruining people's lives by moving drugs into Australia? Or do you lean towards the side that says it makes no difference? Besides, there's 10 other dealers to replace you and you are not forcing anyone to take drugs. You are simply providing a product which the junkies wanted.
Is this Matt? Was it?
Matt 1.
wonder whether there's a two. I think I answered his.
Yeah, you did answer a lot of these online, but people don't see them.
No, I understand that. As I said to Matt, the fact that other people are doing it is no excuse. We all have to be accountable for what we do, even if we take a while to realize that. But I and my friends started out from the position that everything should be legalized, even A-class.
Agree entirely.
That if drugs cause problems, and which they do, some drugs are just hard to resist, like crack cocaine. Others cause withdrawals if you stop using them, like opiates. But this is something that, as in all things in human life, people need to understand how they can control these things within their life. The problem is, by outlawing it, it dictated that the price be black market prices, and therefore high, because the risks became high. Now, still no excuse for me being in it, but I so strongly held that belief that if you want to change the law, you break the law. And it was something I knew about firsthand. And people say these drugs ruin my life. Lots of things can ruin a person's life. Alcohol can ruin somebody's life. But certainly unregulated drugs can be dangerous. In my defense, I'd always said back then that mine was kitchen clean and the weights were accurate. But looking back on it from another point of view, which you only get at a kind of advanced stage, I guess, is that we've only got a limited time on Earth, and I probably could have done something better with my time than that.
So drug laws created the drug problem. Politicians made drugs illegal. Completely worthless plants became more valuable than gold. And that's been the biggest profit opportunity in the history of the world for criminal organizations to flood the entire world with drugs. And the politicians know that, but they've figured out ways to profit from it.
Yeah, in a petty bureaucratic way, but they do it.
I think the legal system's one of the biggest employers in America now.
Oh, and the prison industry, yes, keep building them.
This guy's got a colourful name, Butt Sexting One.
I wonder what he does in his other visits to YouTube outlets. Okay, butt sexting. I like your name anyway.
David, have you ever read Uncle Fester's Secrets of Methamphetamine Manufacture? And if so, what did you think of it? Edition 8.5 is out now. Also, Bloody Brazilian Knife Fighting Techniques. Looks like an interesting read, LOL.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I know you. I'll just call you Butt. No, really, Butt. There were a lot of manuals out in the 70s when I grew up about how to start off your own laboratory and make things. Even one how to build an atomic bomb.
The Anarchist Cookbook, is that one of those?
Yeah, that was a famous one, wasn't it? But it had very poor drawings in it and missed out a couple of important points. The one that referred to there, edition 18 or 8, is actually better than most. But it doesn't really solve the problem. Where the hell do you get the precursors? P2P doesn't, you can't get it at your local hardware shop. B&Q doesn't carry it as far as I know. And without those precursors, never really even going to get started. So they would have, and the cost of buying 8 million packets of cold and flu remedy to scratch out the ephedrine and sort of work your way backward, it really wouldn't be worth it. But he sounds like a man of wide reading habits.
Perhaps it's handy for the Mexican cartel. So Kingpin 341, a man who's perhaps, or female who's perhaps names themselves in honor of your series. David, over the 40 plus years, how many of your clients or even other competitors have slipped through the net of the authorities and made enough money to retire and never work again, or started up legal businesses?
Most of my close friends ended up dead from one reason or another. Not necessarily the business, but they through, what could you call it, kind of natural causes or health problems or car accidents. But certainly a couple of them worn down by the legal system. Some of my Danish friends, I mean, it sounds so civilized, Scandinavia, but if you're arrested there, until your trial is completed, you're held in isolation. You don't get to mix with any other prisoners. They've got exercise yards just for those remand prisoners. And they, it looks like segments of an orange. You go in one at a time and never see anybody else. One close friend there was 22 months on isolation waiting for his trial. It just wore him out, and bad medical attention in prisons. He died of some liver failure. But no, really, out of my group, I'm the last one left standing.
Gab, Rado, David, in Thailand, don't they sit you down and you have your hands tied and they place a Thai orchid between your hands and machine gun you from behind?
Not from behind, but some of those details are right. The old practice was to be tied to a leaning board, tilting backwards, and the machine gun is welded to a bench top about 8 feet away. The flowers, yes, it depends how far back you want to go, but the flowers were meant to be some kind of vaguely Buddhist offering, make peace with your maker, but they don't believe in a maker exactly. It just does an eternal cycle. But they don't do that anymore. They use lethal injection, Thailand.
Oh, they use lethal injection
Yes, they
now?
switched over that in the last 5 or 6 years. So
Always copying the
still
Americans.
some dispute over getting the bodies back. But
Gabe, the Yid. Hi, David. You mentioned the rise of the Albanian gangs in London, UK and Europe. Have you had any dealings with them? And if so, or not even, what is it, in your opinion, that has made them so effective in monopolising the UK underworld in such a relatively short space of time?
So it's really, why have they been successful?
Yeah, is it because they'll just go all the way and they'll kill your entire family?
Well, they might be determined in that way, but generally not. They're just hard workers. They're willing to work nights, and they have their real asset in their sense is that they have an uninterrupted supply. It's very strange stuff, I should say. It's mostly manufactured in Albania. There's a little cocaine in there, but not much. It's almost entirely variations of ephedrine and low-level speed. Not so much speed that you say, well, this is clearly speed, but and some other kind of slightly trippy toxin that's in there. I think the one that's used for worming tablets. It's done in a bulk way. So they've always got it. They're on the job. People often assume that ruthlessness is a way to success in narcotics business, but it isn't. Those kids who ran out and thought, I think I'll go into the drug business. I'll get a butcher's apron and a chainsaw. Some safety goggles. I think that's the way to start. Not destined to do too well.
He's also asked, why are the prices of narcotics so high in Australia?
Distance and the difficulty of importing. The air network makes it very hard to get through airports. And the sea network works better from their point of view. but is expensive to set up. So it's, I think, to tradition, and they started high and they stayed that way. Certainly cocaine is probably 10 times the cost here. If somebody, one of the earlier questioners asked me if somebody had survived being in this business. I did know some Italian weed growers who did one huge crop and then got out of it altogether, bought a restaurant and never looked back. But that's rare that you can say to yourself, okay, I did well on this one and I'm not going to do it again. So much temptation to say, well, it worked the first time. But this, because there's back a tradition in Australia of the high prices, it kind of stayed that way.
It's the final question from him is, what are your thoughts on the fentanyl epidemic in the US? Can you see it spreading to the UK?
I can't, and UK drug-taking habits seem to be pretty established. People, it goes in kind of waves. I mean, speed used to be big here, wasn't it, really once? But also because Pakistani brown is plentiful and cheap, fentanyl's difficult to work with. It's very toxic in anything but microscopic levels. Curiously, it'll be the drug of choice that you'll get if you have an operation in hospital here. But there it is, it's measured out. So I don't think so. Also, we have to bear in mind that America is big enough where fringe things can become quite big as a business, and it's happened in that case.
I was surprised that the crystal meth epidemic from Arizona that I saw didn't translate over here, because a lot of people quit the coke because the meth you can just do one line and keep going, but the coke you got to keep buying and keep buying and keep buying, so they just moved over to the meth and the coke. Has David any stories about Chopper? This is from I Am So Thursday Gaming.
All right. Oh, Chopper Reed. Oh, he always had a sense of humour. Even when he was in the Supermax there, he had, he could take being stabbed without any real effect.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I always thought Eric Bana played him terribly well. And it was Chopper's choice to have Eric Banana play him. And he, because there were kind of some similarities. He's dead now, isn't he, Chopper? Died a couple of years ago.
Didn't he get cancer?
Yeah, and he moved back to some family place in Tasmania or something.
Did you have any interactions with him?
Only in the Supermax, and we told a couple of jokes to each other, but he wasn't really in the drug business in any serious way. He would just go where the money was. If he could, threaten or steal some money from somebody, he'd do it. He didn't have the stomach or the patience for doing it in any real way.
So this has come from To Balkane.
Oh, I see him from time to time. Hi there, TBK. Yes, he's quite a reader, by the way.
Were you using heroin in Klong Pram? I understood you got clean before that, but judging from Thai prison memoirs, everyone who can afford dope uses it, if only to numb the emotional pain and help pass the time.
Well, no. I wanted to get out of there. I didn't want to numb anything and needed what faculties I had concentrated on that. So I hadn't been near it for 10 years, and it was certainly... It seemed to me that anything that would have been a distraction would have been... I was just too angry and determined to move ahead. My chances were slim enough without taking the edge off anything I might be able to do.
Here's the next question. Did all those years in third world dungeons have a detrimental effect on your physical and mental health? There are all kinds of tropical diseases. There's TB, viruses, food poisoning. and PTSD?
Well, those are two different things. Physically, it's interesting. I went for a checkup quite a few years ago, and the clinician there said, odd thing, you've got antibodies for everything. All the diseases that you're likely to get, even a few rare ones, I'd already picked up antibodies to. And I noticed I could drink tap water in Thailand or Pakistan, and I wouldn't get an upset stomach. It hasn't really had... I'm getting more run down now from working regular jobs than I ever did back in that business. And also even my own drug use was pretty regulated, so it didn't have any effect like that. As for the mental side of things, probably. It goes on, but if the content and quality of my dreams is anything to go by, I mean, there is never a night without some fictional fantasy world jail that has to be overcome in the dream.
I imagine there's a few ghosts in there as well. Buster Edwards. David, did you ever encounter Warren Fellows, fellow Australian in the business of heroin importation? Thought to ask you during a previous podcast when you mentioned Neddy Smith as they worked together.
Warren was an early arrestee, if I can say that, in Thailand. And no, wait on, it was they were in Malaysia, wasn't it? Warren Fellows, yeah. And he was facing death. Yeah, there was Warren Fellows ended up doing, it was his book Damage Done, wasn't it?
Oh, that was Thailand.
Yeah, that was Thailand. I was thinking of Balu and Chambers, who actually got executed in Malaysia. That was when Bob Hawke was Prime Minister, and he called them barbaric and all of that, but he didn't really mean it. He certainly didn't have the Foreign Affairs Department intervene in any serious way. Governments can stop other governments from executing their citizens if they want. The French did with some girl there in Malaysia. They're about to execute her, and the French said, "No, we're serious, don't do it." Oh, didn't know you were. So it was just the usual publicity blast they would expect, so they just let her go, and nothing to them. And Warren Fellows, he I knew quite a bit about it because the mess he left behind sort of reached me indirectly. Because I think his girlfriend knew some girl I knew and wanted some advice, and she must have got the right kind because she ran off with the Porsche and took the money and dumped him. So I wonder whether that was her own idea or probably what her girlfriends told her. But I think he knew that was going to happen. Guys have strange attitudes to what they think is going to go on outside when they get inside. I knew a very level-headed guy in prison years ago who his girl used to come and see him every week, and he was getting out in about 2 weeks later. I said, "Your girl not coming?" He said, No, she'd be getting rid of the boyfriend this weekend. What do you mean? Oh, she can't live without it. She doesn't tell me about it. I don't know anything about it, but, she's my girl and it'll always be that way. She just has to get rid of him before I turn up. So he could live with the idea that, this would be the bust-up weekend, so he'd be thrown out. He would have got a surprise if he'd hung around, that's for sure.
Buster Edwards. Oh, I'm sorry. Whoop Whoop. Can you ask David what was the most scared he ever got in Thai jail, apart from the night of his escape?
It wasn't. Thai prisons are not terribly scary, in as much as they can be dangerous in an offhand way. You can get involved in something where that childlike anger comes across to you, and you can be harmed. But your biggest danger in a Thai prison is from your fellow foreigners or crossing the Nigerian gangs in some way. So that wasn't really no. There wasn't anything. You know, the kinds of things that were scary were running out of time. Think if I heard something, if I heard that I know the DEA were trying to bring my case to a close. That kind of news was scary, but nothing within the jail itself.
Court news can be terrible. Okay, Victor Ruelas. David is a treasure of true stories. Great podcast. How old was David when he was first arrested?
Very first arrest. Let's see now. 9. I'd broken into the Bryant and May. Nothing came of it. Bryant and May matchbox factory. I used to collect matchbox labels. Back in the 60s, they came in sets of 64, which the company would issue every year. So I collected them, walked the streets, found them in gutters, got on my skateboard and ran around, and I became obsessed with them. So weirdly enough, it was from a 7-year-old. I bought the plans to the match factory. Yeah, from a 7-year-old. His name was Brian Carlson. He was the weirdest kid I've ever come across. Teachers were freaked by him. He was the only kid that used to sit down with 2 little girlfriends. He had these two little 7-year-old cuties either side of him. And teachers would go, Carlson, no, I don't want to talk to you. And because I knew him because he bought I cracked it, the inside of a bottle cap to some fizz drink, had a winning bicycle on it or something. And next minute, I've got Brian Carlson on my case. Now, I want to buy that from you. Why? I just won it. Yeah, but it's more use to me. And he treasured it off. And you know what I got suckered into? He gave me the Missing Man from Uncle card. They came in a set of 61. You could never get 61. And 2 sets of Monkeys cards. But when he heard I was interested in Matchbox label, he sold me to the plans. And they were elaborate. Take a train to here, climb this, go up there, down the light well, through the shower system. And I got into the place on a Sunday, and it was like I died and gone to heaven. Big skips full of matchboxes. Security guard got me. I was taken in by the police. So I'll rack that up as an arrest.
Wow. That'll make a great clip. Arrested at 9 years old.
Didn't talk though.
Plead the fifth. Get me a lawyer. So this guy, Joe, sent me an email that I received. Must have been last night. I believe he saw you on Tom London Jewel Thief's live chat.
Came in late.
Live chat on the premiere, yeah. So he sent this email, and all of the podcasts now are on premiere, usually a Monday night at 6 p.m. And there's a live chat next to the podcast, and if anyone wants to join in the live chat, sometimes the guests join in as well. So this is from Joe. I have the following question for David. You mentioned a lot of people travel each day on false documents, falsified. Does he think that as technology progresses, it is becoming an impossible feat, and how hard it is today compared to when he did it? Several countries, even India now, use biometric tech like fingerprint scanners at the airport.
When biometric passports came in, it took the Malaysians about 2 weeks to be able to copy the chip. I like the foolproof ID. It means your bogus stuff is going to be accepted much more readily. Of course, presumably, it depends on the start point. Once they've got everybody, then it gets very difficult because you can't. It's like in the US, they've got a social security number, which you get from birth almost, don't you?
I've got one of them. US one.
Well, those numbers, though they're not strictly sequential, it's very hard to backdate one to match it in. So when death certificates are now matched with birth certificates, so you can't go some other identity. But that's not to say that you can't be somebody else. That'll go on for quite a while.
He said, I'm also interested in what he thinks about how progress and technology impact the power balance between regulation and human ingenuity to circumvent it. Does tech allow us to build taller walls faster than it allows us to build taller ladders to climb over them?
Well, that's a good way to put it, isn't it? Um, I think it depends on how much the state, how much Big Brother wants to control our lives. Um, I think a lot of a younger generation accepts that there's no secrets in their life. So they have to be a bit fringe anyway to get into trouble. But once somebody is already of age and has electronic footprint everywhere, they should be very thoughtful about disappearing for that. And also, it pays to plan ahead to look at the things that might become the de facto ID card of a country. In Australia, they don't have ID cards, but I was an early adopter of the only national database they had, which was the Medicare or Medicaid. I think it was called Medicare, the National Health Service base. That was the only thing where they really had everybody on it. So when they were talking about upgrading systems, while there was still time, I ran out and got 100 or something when it was just like over the counter at a post office. So in this country, that'll be the thing to look for, because though I don't know, where do you think they'll start? Not everybody has a tax file number. But look at what Experian and the other agencies, if you don't have, no matter that you have never ended up owing anybody money, if you don't have Facebook, it's almost like you're a nobody. It's all right if you're over 70 and you're not part of that generation, but it'll soon come to be that you're a non-person if you're not in social media.
If you have any more questions for David, please put them in the comments box below this video. And when we go over to part 6, we will put some of those questions forward to him. David has been very generous again today. Agreed to come in and do a 2-hour podcast that has extended now to 3 hours. So David has always been so generous with his time coming over here and spending all this time and answering your questions. So please, let's show our love and support back for David by buying his books. You know, it's only less than a tenner on Kindle, available worldwide. Links are in the description box. We set out to get David 1,000 YouTube subscribers by the end of the year. I think he's at over 2,000 now. So please click over and subscribe to David's channel. David does post his own videos.
Yeah, not many, but if I get another 500, I'll get off my bum and do a few for you. And we didn't have time for my recollections on sex and prison, but we'll save that for some other time. Unless you want to just chop it in.
Please,
all right, then.
leave your thoughts in the comment section.
And
please
support Shaun
and subscribe to my channel as well. We're over 200,000 subs. Appreciate that, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks again, brother. Yeah.
So that was part 5 of the long form interviews. This one going on close to 3 hours, pretty much. And there's more to come. Part 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 will be recorded fairly soon as I speak, which is the end of August 2020, in the kind of scrappy tail endings of COVID-19 panic. Now, I know everything seems perfectly fine, and the statistics are saying that we've got more chance of becoming ill from a seasonal summer flu than actually getting the dreaded COVID. But still, will in time this all seem like a worry over nothing very much? We'll see. So, there are a few things I should record while I'm in the mood, not that I ever really am. A few questions about that Brenton Tarrant. Wow, the New Zealand, well, they call him a terrorist, but a raving lunatic is better. He looks like a bit of a mutant anyway. I bet he's no more than about 5 foot tall. And a real jail entity, I'm sure he will turn out to be, as they send him back to Delta Block in Auckland. I'll record something about what I predict for his miserable jail life. And peculiar things happen in those high-security places because I've been in them myself. When I was in years ago in that part of the world, Australia it was, it held 50 and had almost 40 deaths a year one year. Grim. Deaths mostly by prisoners attacking other prisoners, some torched, covered in liquid glue and then set alight, others in misfired protests, which they set fire to old heavy foam mattresses that sent out green acrid smoke. Yeah, I suppose that's another theme for a video, isn't it? Worst prison experiences. I don't know where to start, wouldn't know where to stop. Don't you find that depressing? But also, something else is coming up. And that's about, I've had a lot of viral, the things you get passed on WhatsApp where somebody thinks it's funny. Really complaints about the quality of cocaine around London as we speak.
This is a message to all you fucking...
With every justification. Our local man, I don't know what he's got, powdered wallpaper paste or something, but absolute rubbish. Are we going to stand here and take that, my fellow disreputables? Or should we go fund me for a drug run? Would that be good? I think I might know somebody in Colombia. And do we have any way of doing it? Or do you have some ideas? I've been out of the game for a while, though I keep my eye on it for educational purposes. Yes, that's what I'm saying. And I'll bring that up in a one-off kind of, well, perhaps a little series, imagining you doing your own drug run. Are you up to it? Well, we'll see. Anyway, if you want more of this, probably at some point there'll be part 6 coming up. Good night. Get some rest. Look like you need it.